Hey guys, tonight, we're stepping into a world far removed from what you might imagine, the hidden, dark side of medieval Japanese marriages. Behind the elegant kimono and serene tea ceremonies lay secrets filled with duty, sacrifice, and sometimes unbearable pain. These marriages were not just unions of love, but often chains of political strategy, family honor, and harsh expectations that shaped the lives of countless women and men. Imagine being trapped in a contract where your personal desires were silenced, where your fate was controlled by others, and where heartbreak was a silent, daily companion. Tonight's story will take you deep into this secret world, a world of hidden struggles that history rarely tells. If you want to uncover the untold stories and emotional truths behind these ancient customs, this sleeping story is essential. Listening, make sure to subscribe, leave a comment with your location, and join me for the full 2 hours. This is a journey you won't want to miss. In the delicate shadows of medieval Japan, under the gentle sway of cherry blossoms and towering temples, marriage was not simply the union of two individuals. It was a ritual steeped in duty, political strategy, and the preservation of power, far removed from the ideals of romantic love we might envision today. In this ancient world, where loyalty, family, and honor were paramount, marriages were arranged for purposes far greater than personal connection. In the aristocratic circles of the Heian and Kamakura periods, marriage was a business transaction, a solemn arrangement forged to strengthen family lines, secure land, and establish powerful alliances. The gentle rustle of silk robes as families negotiated these unions was more than ceremonial, it was a matter of survival. Through these marriages, the stability and influence of entire clans were upheld, ensuring that power remained in the hands of the right families. For the women of these powerful households, marriage was often a life sentence, though not in the way we might imagine. They were not asked for their consent. They were not consulted on their desires. Instead, they were often given to men they did not know, sometimes even before they reached adulthood, chosen solely for their ability to produce heirs and serve the interests of their families. Love, as we know it, was a distant thought if it existed at all. The concept of marriage in medieval Japan was not about romantic affection or mutual desire. It was about land, politics, and family alliances. These unions were forged in the quiet chambers of powerful households, far away from the glistening palaces or sunlit courtyards one might expect. The social contract of marriage during this period was not an exchange between two individuals. It was a binding agreement between families, each negotiating their place within a hierarchical system that stretched across centuries. Land, especially, was at the heart of these negotiations. In a society where agriculture was the backbone of life, the ability to secure fertile land meant wealth, power, and long-term survival. Land was not just property, it was the source of a family's prosperity and influence. The right marriage, made for the right reasons, could shift the balance of power across entire regions. It was through such unions that a powerful family could solidify control over territories, gain access to resources, or expand their dominion over weaker clans. Marriage, in this period, was thus a tool of diplomacy. For the samurai, who were both warriors and landowners, the ideal of personal love was never prioritized over the protection of their legacy. Their marriages were more strategic than personal. A well-placed union could secure peace in a turbulent time, strengthen alliances with powerful families, and protect the samurai's status within their region. In a world that depended on feudal hierarchies and military might, marriage was as much a weapon as a sword. Within the inner courtyards of noble households, the quiet exchange of gift silk kimonos, rare spices, and precious metals as tokens of the marriage contract. But beneath the surface, these exchanges were deeply tied to power. Women, often still children, were presented as part of the inheritance of wealth and territory. Their bodies, their lives, and even their futures were laid out as part of a game of power that they had little say in, while the men wielded power outside the home. In politics and warfare, women's roles were defined by their ability to manage domestic affairs and bear children. In this deeply patriarchal society, women were valued not for their personal desires or romantic connections, but for their ability to fulfill their duty to family and legacy. The presence of love, if it existed at all, was reserved for private moments, hidden from the public eye. For the women in these marriages, the absence of personal choice was a constant. When a marriage was arranged, it was often viewed as a family's obligation rather than an individual's decision. The bride would be led to her new life with little fanfare, often accompanied only by the quiet rustling of her kimono and the distant murmur of family members watching from the shadows. On the day of her wedding, the young bride would step into her husband's home with grace, her movements slow, as if carrying the weight of generations on her shoulders. The celebrations were often quiet, intimate affairs, and the bride would wear a pale white kimono with a delicate red and gold sash, symbols of purity, renewal, and new beginnings. Yet beneath the surface of these customs, the weight of her new role was undeniable. In many ways, it was not her choice to make, but one made by her family, dictated by the harsh reality of survival and societal order. Her marriage was about her family's status, alliances, and securing their future. The connection she formed with her husband, if it formed at all, came much later, built over years of shared experience and quiet understanding. For many women, this bond was never fully realized, as their husbands remained distant, preoccupied with their own political obligations, family matters, and business dealings. Imagine then the emotional weight these women carried, the sense of isolation, the quiet yearning for something deeper than duty, something personal. These marriages often meant that the wife's world was confined to the household, where she was expected to carry out her duties, care for the children, and manage the home without complaint or expectation of appreciation. Her voice was rarely heard in the corridors of power, and her desires were often silenced beneath the weight of obligation. While the men of these families were frequently out on campaigns or in meetings with other powerful figures, the women remained behind, holding the fort, their lives often defined by the demands of home and hearth. It was a silent, almost invisible life, defined by a strict set of expectations. Their value, their worth, was measured by their ability to maintain the household, bear heirs, and ensure the smooth functioning of the family's public affairs. And yet, beneath this silence, a quiet rebellion sometimes simmered. In the hidden corners of these homes, where the flicker of lantern light softened the harshness of the day, women found ways to speak, to connect, and to find some semblance of emotional fulfillment. While society kept them in their prescribed roles, the heart of these women longed for more than the quiet routines dictated by marriage. Their bonds with their children were often the closest relationships they would have. The love between a mother and her child could transcend the roles they were forced to play, offering brief moments of joy and relief from the heavy chains of societal expectations. These mothers, despite being restrained by the framework of marriage, had the ability to create intimate connections within their homes, shaping the future generations of Japan. Men, on the other hand, played their part in the grand political stage, where marriage was less about affection and more about securing power. Their unions with women were not about love or personal connection, but about the necessity of keeping their families strong, their power consolidated, and their legacy intact. A woman's ability to bear children, especially sons, was her greatest gift to her husband, as her womb secured the future of the family name. For men, love was a distant thought in the whirlpool of their political, military, and familial obligations. They often looked for alliances through marriage, each union a strategic move in a game of power and survival. To love one's wife, while not forbidden, was secondary to the broader mission of maintaining the family's wealth, honor, and influence. The deep traditions of feudal Japan allowed for these marital arrangements to flourish as an expression of societal structure rather than personal choice. Marriage was less about personal desire and more about serving the greater needs of one's family, clan, or even the nation. It was a delicate balance between personal sacrifice and familial duty, one that was woven through the very fabric of Japan's feudal society. As the day turns to night, and the soft light of oil lamps flickers across the clay walls of noble homes, the stark reality of these marriages comes into sharper focus. The husband's return to his home, if he ever returned at all, was often less about reunion and more about fulfilling his duties, whether in overseeing land, managing his military responsibilities, or securing alliances with neighboring families. For the wife, the role was often set in stone before her marriage. She was not meant to disrupt the family's social or political structure. Her job was to maintain it. The expectations were clear: manage the household, ensure the smooth running of daily life, and produce heirs. The weight of the family legacy, and sometimes the legacy of an entire clan, rested upon her shoulders. Yet her freedom was stifled within these roles, her desires and hopes confined by a rigid set of expectations. The marriage ritual itself was far from the intimate, heartfelt exchanges one might imagine in modern unions. Instead, it was an extension of the family's power and influence. The ceremony was a quiet, formal affair, a sacred bond that tied two families together for the sake of land, wealth, and military strength. Even the most personal aspects of marriage, such as the sharing of vows or promises, were often stripped of warmth, a mere formality to solidify the arrangement. And yet, beneath these silent customs, behind the formalities, were the occasional whispers of desire. In the quiet moments, when the household settled into stillness and the flicker of lanterns softened the night, there might be a brief, fleeting connection, a glance, a touch that spoke of a different kind of union. But, for the most part, those fleeting moments were the exception, not the rule. Marriage, for most, was not about passion, but about duty. In a world ruled by the strict expectations of feudal society, the women who found themselves in these marriages had little say in their fate. They were often married at young ages, sometimes even before they fully understood the implications of their new role. Their voices were seldom heard in the matters of politics or land, and even their personal feelings were suppressed for the good of the family's position in society. One might wonder if there were any hope of love, any space for affection within these rigid roles. For some, perhaps there were moments of tenderness between husband and wife, or perhaps between mother and child, that allowed a faint light to shine through the darkness of duty and expectation. But these moments were brief, often overshadowed by the constant demand for service and sacrifice. The bonds formed in these marriages were more about family loyalty than personal connection. A wife's loyalty was her strength, and her submission to the will of the family was her duty. In many ways, she was the cornerstone of the household, yet her autonomy was often stripped away. The very act of love, of connection, was overshadowed by the immense weight of familial and societal obligation. While love was not entirely absent, it was an emotion reserved for the rarest of moments, fleeting and unspoken. What mattered more was the preservation of the family's honor, their land, and their power. The personal was sacrificed for the political, and the emotional was subsumed beneath the weight of duty. As the sun sinks low beneath the horizon, painting the sky with soft hues of amber and violet, the city of medieval Japan continues its quiet, steady rhythm. The women, who played such a vital role in these marriages, may have never fully experienced the love and affection often romanticized in later eras. Their lives, confined within the walls of the household, were shaped by the silent expectations of family and society, their personal dreams often hidden beneath layers of duty. In the grand scheme of the time, marriage was not an opportunity for personal fulfillment, but a mechanism to strengthen alliances, secure power, and ensure continuity. The family's legacy depended upon it, and every individual within the marriage was tasked with upholding that legacy, regardless of their own desires. While the emotional depth of these unions may have been shallow or even absent, the social structure they helped uphold was strong and enduring. Marriages in medieval Japan, particularly among the elite, were the foundations upon which entire dynasties were built. They were not personal affairs, but rather grand strategies designed to preserve the family name, solidify political power, and maintain peace. The darkness that lingered in these marriages, the lack of personal freedom, the silence in the hearts of women, the sacrifices made for family and honor, was accepted as a necessary part of life. Yet, in this quiet suffering, a kind of resilience bloomed. The women of this era found strength in their roles, navigating a world built on expectation rather than affection. As the evening settles over the land, the fires burn low, the whispers of the past carried gently by the wind, the soft rustling of the trees and the distant flow of the rivers serve as reminders that even in the darkest of circumstances, life continues to move forward. In the end, the marriages of medieval Japan were not solely defined by power and political strategy, but by the quiet resilience of those who lived them. The legacy of these unions, though not defined by personal joy, helped shape a society that lasted through resilient, steadfast, and strong. And so, as the quiet night embraces the city, we reflect on the role of marriage in this time, as an individual bond, but as a social contract, a contract woven into the very fabric of a society that valued family, honor, and the preservation of power over the desires of the heart. Yet, within this tapestry, the human spirit remained unbroken, finding its quiet moments of connection, love, and strength. Even in the most difficult of circumstances, in the quiet corridors of feudal Japan, behind the rich silks of kimonos, and beneath the lacquered wooden beams of noble homes, women carried the weight of tradition and duty. With grace, yet their lives were marked by sacrifice, constraint, and a deeply ingrained silence. The role of women in marriage during this time was not one of equality or partnership, but of subservience, bound tightly to the demands of family, power, and survival. Imagine the life of a young woman, poised at the brink of a future she did not choose. Her family's expectations weighed heavily upon her from the moment of her birth. From her earliest days, her existence was intertwined with the needs of her family, destined to serve a purpose far beyond her own desires. Love was not the foundation of her marriage. Instead, it was the securing of alliances, the continuation of bloodlines, and the preservation of her family's honor. Her marriage was arranged long before her voice could be heard in the decision. The marriage contract was a formal arrangement between families, negotiated by her parents and elders. It was the securing of a relationship based on power, influence, and property. The personal feelings, hopes, or dreams of the woman were irrelevant in the decision-making process. Once married, a woman's role was clear and unyielding: to support her husband, to bear heirs, and to manage the home. These were the duties she would carry for life, for her husband was often absent, caught in the intricate dance of power, politics, and military affairs. As his wife, she became the guardian of the household, maintaining order and ensuring the well-being of the children and servants. But even in these duties, she had no autonomy. Her actions were always guided by the needs of her family, and her personal desires, often buried under the weight of obligation, were sacrificed. The very walls of the household became a prison of sorts, her role confined to managing domestic life, overseeing the servants, and raising children. The delicate threads of affection, if they appeared at all, were woven only within the quiet moments of shared family time. But such moments were fleeting, overshadowed by the unspoken expectations that dominated her every action. Women were expected to demonstrate unwavering obedience to their husbands, their voices silenced by societal norms that dictated their behavior. The concept of obedience was deeply ingrained in their marriage vows. A wife was expected to yield to her husband's authority in all things, and to carry out her duties with humility and grace, often without question or complaint. The rights of a woman within the marriage were few and far between. While she held the responsibility of managing the household, her legal status was often that of a child. She had little say in the affairs of the family outside of the home, and her role as a mother was determined by her ability to produce heirs, preferably male. As the continuation of the family name rested on the birth of sons, her own desires, even her own sense of self, were often disregarded. Her worth was defined by her ability to serve the needs of her husband and her family. Even the act of bearing children was not hers to control. Pregnancy and childbirth were part of her duty, something she performed with quiet acceptance. A woman's emotional or physical well-being was secondary to the necessity of producing heirs and ensuring the legacy of her family. The emotional weight of these expectations was profound, though often unseen. Women were not meant to be seen as individuals with their own desires and ambitions. Instead, they were viewed as vessels to fulfill the needs of their family, their role defined by the family's aspirations. Marriage was not an expression of love or companionship. It was a contract, a means of securing the future and maintaining a place in the rigidly defined social order. Imagine the quiet tension within the walls of these homes. In the rooms where a woman spent the majority of her days, whether in the delicate art of tea ceremonies, the preparation of food, or the arranging of flowers, there was little space for herself. These were the small, peaceful moments in a life otherwise dictated by duty. Her worth was defined by her ability to maintain the household, care for her children, and uphold the honor of her husband and family. The beauty she brought to the home was a reflection of the family's status, not a personal achievement. In a society where honor was everything, the wife's ability to bear children was a measure of her value. Her duty as a mother was not only to raise children but to ensure that the family name was carried forward. A woman's status could often be diminished if she failed in this task, with the pressure to produce male heirs especially intense. If a woman bore only daughters, her worth within the family could be called into question. The concept of personal failure was not something that was easily expressed or even recognized. There was no space for such vulnerability in the rigid framework of marriage. The relationships between husband and wife were often distant, shaped by roles rather than affection. The husband was the head of the household, his focus on his own political, military, or economic duties, leaving little time for intimacy or emotional connection with his wife. His primary concern was the expansion of his family's influence and securing the future of his lineage. His wife, in turn, was expected to serve his needs and the needs of the family without question, and her emotional life remained largely silent. Even the intimacy between husband and wife was dictated by duty. The act of reproduction, the effort to produce male heirs, was seen as a solemn responsibility, not an opportunity for love or connection. A wife's feelings on the matter were irrelevant. Her role as a mother was bound by the biological necessity of keeping the family name intact, and so, a woman's desires were often suppressed, her own needs tucked away, as she navigated a marriage centered on obligations rather than personal fulfillment. The emotional landscape of these marriages was often one of loneliness, even in the company of family. Women, though surrounded by the bustle of domestic life, often faced deep emotional isolation. Their feelings, their yearnings, were secondary to the needs of the family. The quiet yearning for personal connection, for affection, was often pushed aside in the shadow of duty. Despite these challenges, some women managed to carve out moments of influence in the household. A strong-willed woman, a mother who fiercely protected her children, might find ways to assert herself within the home. While she could not escape the rigid expectations placed on her, her ability to manage the household, raise children, and maintain the reputation of her family gave her a sense of purpose, though this sense was tied to a system that offered her few choices beyond those given by tradition. But even within the confines of this system, there were moments where women displayed resilient, subtle forms of resistance that were often overlooked. These moments, small yet powerful, were the flickers of humanity that persisted beneath the surface. A woman's quiet strength in managing her household, her ability to raise children in love despite the cold distance of duty, or her moments of warmth shared with her family, spoke to the strength of spirit that existed even in the most oppressive circumstances. The emotional toll on women in medieval Japan was often quietly hidden beneath the layers of silk and ceremonial robes. While the husband's life was filled with politics, military campaigns, and social obligations, the wife's existence was primarily confined to the domestic sphere. The house she managed was her world, a world where she had little voice or control beyond her duties. The idea of marriage as a partnership where affection, trust, and companionship flourished was a distant concept for most women. Instead, marriage was about duty, service, and the perpetuation of family legacy. Women were expected to remain patient and composed, their emotions often repressed in favor of the family's needs. If a wife expressed dissatisfaction or unhappiness, it was often seen as a personal flaw, something to be suppressed in favor of maintaining the honor of her family. The thought of challenging the structure of marriage, or even questioning her role within it, was virtually unthinkable. Silence became a form of survival, a way for women to navigate the complex world of feudal obligations and patriarchal expectations. This silence, however, did not mean that women were devoid of influence. Many women in noble families had a deep understanding of the political and social currents of the time. Though their voices were rarely heard in public matters, their actions within the household could shape the course of family life. In many ways, they were the silent architects of their family's futures. They managed relationships with other households, ensured the well-being of children, and quietly observed the shifting allegiances between families. But despite this power, in domestic matters, women were still subject to the control of their husbands and in-laws. The woman's status within the family was determined not by her own abilities or desires, but by the strength and success of her husband's family. Even if she were a woman of intellect and influence, her worth was always defined by the power of the family she was married into, and by her ability to bear sons to carry on the family name. In this deeply patriarchal society, women's personal happiness was not a consideration in the grand schemes of family legacy. Marriages were not entered into with the expectation of emotional fulfillment, but as a tool for survival. For most women, this meant a life of quiet duty, where personal desires were subordinated to the family's needs. A woman's dreams, if they existed, were often buried beneath layers of obligation. Despite these constraints, some women managed to navigate the harsh landscape of medieval marriage with subtle strength. Women in the samurai class, though bound by the same societal expectations, sometimes found power in their position as matriarchs. While they may not have been able to speak their minds in public or lead armies like their husbands, they wielded influence in quiet, behind-the-scenes ways. Their ability to maintain peace in the home, manage affairs, and even broker alliances could have a significant impact on the trajectory of their family's fortunes. In rare instances, there were stories of women who stepped outside the conventional roles expected of them. Some women were known to take on the role of warriors, leading troops into battle to defend their family's honor. While these examples were exceptions rather than the norm, they highlighted the inner strength and resilience of women who, despite being bound by duty, could find ways to express their own agency in moments of dire need. However, such stories were few, and for most women, the path to personal fulfillment was closed. They were tied to their marriages through duty and obligation, forced to sacrifice their own desires for the benefit of their families. They spent their lives ensuring the continuation of their husband's name and legacy, all while suppressing their own emotions, their own hopes, and their own dreams. As the years passed and seasons changed, the women of medieval Japan continued to bear the weight of their roles in silence. They spent their lives in service to their husbands, their families, and the legacy of the name they had married into. Even as time moved on, their duties remained unchanged, bearing children, particularly sons, to continue the family line and to secure their family's position within the larger social structure. The women who had the privilege of a voice were those who held influence behind the walls of their homes, shaping the future of their children and managing the affairs of the household with quiet authority. Yet, even the strongest women in these marriages remained subject to the will of their husbands or in-laws. Their lives, though rich in responsibility, were often devoid of personal joy, for joy in their roles was not expected or sought. Their lives were built on sacrifice for family, for tradition, for the future. In rare moments, a glimpse of emotional freedom might be found. Perhaps a wife found solace in the love she had for her children, or a quiet bond might develop between husband and wife over the years. But these moments were few and fleeting, often overshadowed by the overwhelming demands placed on women in this system of duty and submission. Love, if it ever appeared in a marriage, was a distant and fragile emotion, not the foundation upon which these unions were built. Women were expected to accept their fates, not challenge them, and their happiness was secondary to the survival and success of their family. The fulfillment of familial duty was the only acceptable aspiration for a wife, and any dreams beyond that were quietly silenced by the societal structures that governed their every move, though their roles were confining. Women in medieval Japan were not powerless. They carried strength within themselves, even if they were often unaware of it. They exhibited resilience in the face of oppressive expectations and found quiet ways to influence the course of their family's destiny. They managed households, ensured the survival of their children, and held the fabric of the family together, even when it seemed that their personal desires were sacrificed at every turn. As night falls upon the household, with the flickering light of lanterns casting gentle shadows on the walls, one can almost feel the silent determination of these women, quiet yet steadfast. Their lives may not have been their own in the truest sense, but their strength, though subtle, endured through time. In this world of duty and tradition, they were the silent keepers of the family's legacy, the ones who ensured that the names of their husbands and children continued. And so, the story of women in medieval Japanese marriages is one of quiet endurance. It is a story of sacrifice, a story of strength, and a story of lives lived under the heavy weight of duty and family expectations. It is a reminder that even in the darkest corners of tradition, there is strength, even when the light of personal freedom seems so distant. In the dimly lit rooms of medieval Japanese households, a complex dance of power and control unfolded, one shaped by centuries of tradition, social hierarchy, and strict patriarchal rules. Behind the carefully folded silk robes and the polished wooden floors, the relationship between husband and wife was less a partnership and more a hierarchy, where authority rested firmly in the hands of the man. The husband was the undisputed head of the household, wielding control over every aspect of family life. His word was law, his authority rarely questioned or challenged. Within the home's walls, the wife was expected to be obedient, silent, and submissive, her role confined to fulfilling her duties without dissent. Imagine the atmosphere of such a household: walls adorned with calligraphy and delicate paintings, the soft light of paper lanterns casting shadows on the tatami mats. Yet beneath this serene surface, the balance of power was heavily tilted. The wife's autonomy was limited, her decisions bound by the wishes and commands of her husband. Control was exerted in many ways, both overt and subtle. Husbands managed the household finances, dictated the upbringing of children, and decided the daily routine. A wife's life was often closely monitored, her movements and associations carefully regulated to ensure she adhered to the expectations of her role. Isolation was a common consequence of this power dynamic. Women were often cut off from social interactions outside the family, especially with men unrelated to their husbands. Their world became the household and the small community of women who served alongside them. This physical and social isolation reinforced the control husbands had over their wives, limiting their access to external support or alternative perspectives. Despite these limitations, women were not always passive. There were moments, subtle and quiet, where they asserted their will or resisted the strictures placed upon them. Such resistance, however, was often cloaked in discretion and tact, for open defiance could lead to severe consequences. Forms of resistance could take the shape of small acts: delaying obedience, questioning instructions softly, or seeking solace in the company of trusted female confidants. These acts, while seemingly minor, represented a flicker of personal agency within a tightly controlled environment. However, patriarchal structures were designed to suppress such resistance. Husbands, and often the wider family, employed strategies to maintain control. This could include increased surveillance, withdrawal of privileges, or social pressure exerted through extended family networks. The consequences for women who openly defied their roles could be harsh. Scolding, social ostracism, or even more severe punishments were tools used to enforce obedience. The cultural emphasis on honor and family reputation meant that women's behavior was closely tied to the social standing of the entire household. Yet, even within this restrictive framework, women found ways to navigate and sometimes negotiate their circumstances. The subtle art of influence through managing household affairs, guiding children's education, or advising husbands in private, became a source of power that could be wielded quietly but effectively. The power dynamics of marriage in medieval Japan were thus a delicate balance of authority, control, and discreet resistance, a complex web where women's voices were constrained but never entirely silenced. Within the confines of the traditional Japanese household, the husband's authority was reinforced not only by custom but also by the weight of cultural expectations. His position as the patriarch was unquestioned, his decisions final. This authority extended over all members of the household, but most palpably over his wife. The wife's life was tightly regulated, her behavior carefully observed by both her husband and the extended family. Every action, from how she dressed to whom she spoke with, was subject to scrutiny. Modesty and obedience were prized virtues, and deviation from these ideals could bring shame not only upon the woman but also upon her entire family. In many households, the presence of in-laws, particularly the mother-in-law, added another layer of control and complexity. The mother-in-law often acted as the enforcer of tradition, ensuring that the daughter-in-law adhered strictly to her expected role. This relationship was frequently fraught with tension, as the younger woman struggled to find her place within a a household that was not her own. The emotional isolation that many wives experienced was profound. Cut off from their natal families and social circles, their daily lives revolved around servitude, child-rearing, and managing the household. The absence of personal freedom was keenly felt, yet outwardly, women were expected to display grace and composure. Despite the restrictive environment, some women cultivated subtle forms of resistance. They learned the art of quiet persuasion, using kindness, tact, and sometimes cunning to influence household decisions. By managing servants, nurturing children, and handling delicate family matters, they carved out a sphere of influence within their limited domain. For example, a wife's ability to raise sons who would inherit the family estate gave her a form of respect and power unseen by outsiders. Through their children, women could exert a lasting influence, shaping the future of their family long after their own voice had been silenced. However, this power was fragile and precarious, always balanced against the demands of obedience and the ever-present threat of punishment. Any sign of disobedience could be met with strict reprimands, ranging from verbal scolding to social exclusion. The fear of disgrace was a powerful tool used to enforce control. In a society where honor and reputation were paramount, the actions of a wife were not merely personal matters, they reflected upon the entire family. A scandal or breach of conduct could result in severe social consequences, not just for the woman but for her husband and children as well. In some cases, women who dared to openly challenge their prescribed roles faced even harsher consequences. Stories passed down through history tell of wives who resisted and were cast out, or worse, punished in ways that remain veiled in silence but speak of the severity of their defiance. Yet it is important to recognize that these women were not merely victims of circumstance. They were individuals with their own desires, hopes, and strengths. Within the boundaries set by society, many found ways to assert themselves, protect their children, and maintain their dignity. The power dynamics within medieval Japanese marriages were thus not a simple story of domination and submission, but a complex interplay of control, resistance, and negotiation. Husbands held overt authority, but wives exercised subtle, often unseen power within the confines of their roles. Beyond the daily rituals and strict expectations, the home was a battlefield of unspoken tensions and fragile negotiations. The husband's authority was like a mountain, immovable, imposing, while the wife's influence resembled the quiet streams that, over time, shaped the very landscape of the household. She learned to navigate this delicate balance with care, cultivating relationships not just with her husband but with servants, relatives, and even neighbors. The subtle power she wielded was often invisible to outsiders but vital to the functioning of the household. By managing resources, organizing daily tasks, and influencing her children's upbringing, she shaped the future in ways that transcended her visible limitations. Occasionally, these undercurrents of influence created spaces for women to resist overt control. Some found solace in their spiritual practices, turning to Buddhism or Shinto rituals to seek strength and guidance. These practices offered a private sanctuary, a place where they could connect with something greater than their immediate circumstances. Others expressed resistance through small acts of defiance, delaying a task, quietly disagreeing with decisions, or fostering relationships that were independent of their husband's control. These acts, while subtle, were powerful assertions of selfhood in a system designed to suppress it. Yet, resistance was always met with the risk of punishment. The societal structure was built to maintain order and uphold the patriarchal hierarchy, and any challenge threatened this delicate balance. Husbands, mothers-in-law, and even broader family networks could enforce conformity through social pressure or direct reprimand. In some stories passed through generations, women who resisted too strongly faced exile or harsher penalties, a grim reminder of the limits imposed upon them. Their struggles, often hidden in history's shadows, speak volumes about the strength and resilience required to survive in such a constrained world. Within this system, marriage was less a union of equals and more a complex negotiation of power, one where control was maintained through traditions, social expectations, and emotional constraints. Despite the limitations, the hearts of these women held dreams of connection, respect, and autonomy. They nurtured these dreams quietly, like delicate flowers growing in the cracks of stone. sustained by moments of tenderness and hope. This quiet tension between control and resistance, silence and strength defined the power dynamics within medieval Japanese marriages. It was a world where authority was asserted through tradition and obedience, yet where the human spirit found subtle ways to endure. In the vast tapestry of medieval Japanese society, the power dynamics within marriage were a reflection of the broader cultural fabric, one woven tightly with threads of hierarchy, duty, and honor. The husband's dominance was never questioned openly, yet the wife's resilience was a quiet force that shaped the home's true nature. This resilience often took the form of endurance, strength that enabled women to fulfill their roles. Despite emotional hardship and limited freedoms, their lives were marked by a paradox, constrained by societal norms, yet vital to the continuity of family and culture. Even when isolated within the home, women maintained connections with other women, forming networks of support that helped them bear the weight of their roles. These relationships provided emotional sustenance and occasional avenues for subtle resistance. The power imbalance was stark, but it was tempered by moments of tenderness, respect, and sometimes genuine affection. Though rare and often hidden, these moments revealed that human connection could exist even within rigid structures. The husband's control was exercised, not only through authority but through the cultural expectation that the wife would serve and obey. This control was reinforced by ritual, social pressure, and the ever-watchful eyes of extended family. Yet, within this framework, some women found ways to influence the course of their lives and those of their children. Using intelligence, patience, and subtlety, their influence was often invisible to the outside world but deeply felt within the home. As night descends on this ancient world, the silent strength of these women lingers in the shadows, an enduring testament to their courage and perseverance. Their stories, often untold, are woven into the history of marriage in medieval Japan, a history defined by both control and resilience, silence and strength. In the tranquil villages and bustling towns of medieval Japan, where cherry blossoms danced softly in the spring breeze, an ancient temple stood in quiet reverence. The lives of young women were often predetermined by forces beyond their control. The practice of marriage was a solemn duty imposed not by love or personal choice, but by the will of families, social expectation, and tradition. Imagine a young girl, barely stepping out of childhood, whose future has already been shaped by the decisions of her parents and elders, her fate sealed long before she could comprehend the full weight of the commitment she was about to undertake. This was the reality for countless young women, for whom marriage was less a union of two souls and more a contract and obligation to family honor and social order. From early childhood, the path was set. Families negotiated alliances through marriage as if their daughters were pieces on a chessboard, moved strategically to secure alliances, land, and status. The wishes of the girl, her feelings, and her dreams were rarely, if ever, taken into account. Instead, she was expected to accept the role assigned to her, with grace and obedience. The cultural fabric of the time wove strict expectations into the lives of these young women. Resistance was discouraged, and often punished, for the harmony of the family and the honor of the clan took precedence over individual desires. The girl's identity was often overshadowed by her function within the broader social system, a system that valued duty above all else. In many cases, the bride would meet her future husband for the first time only on the day of the wedding. The ceremony itself was a public confirmation of alliances between families, with little room for personal expression. The young woman was dressed in ceremonial robes, white and red, symbolizing purity and transition, her face calm and composed, concealing the complex emotions stirring beneath. The ceremony marked not only a change of status, but a profound loss of personal freedom. Once married, the woman was expected to leave her family home and enter her husband's household, a world often unfamiliar and governed by new rules and hierarchies. Her days would be consumed with the duties expected of a wife, managing the household, producing heirs, and upholding the honor of her new family. The autonomy she once might have had as a daughter in her natal home was replaced by subservience and strict adherence to her role as a wife. Societal expectations left little room for dissent. The concept of individual choice in marriage was. Foreign marriages were seen as transactions between families rather than unions of affection. The idea that a woman could refuse an arranged marriage or choose her own path was rarely entertained. Families feared that defiance would bring shame, not only upon the woman, but upon the entire family. Such shame could lead to social ostracism, loss of status, and even economic hardship. Thus, young women were often compelled to accept their fate, no matter how uncertain or unwelcome. The emotional impact of these forced marriages was profound. Feelings of fear, confusion, and loneliness often accompanied the transition into married life. For many young women, their world narrowed, their voices silenced by the weight of expectations. Yet despite these hardships, stories also tell of quiet courage, women who, through resilience and strength, found ways to endure, to nurture their families, and to preserve their dignity amid constraints. Their lives, though marked by loss of autonomy, were also stories of survival and quiet resistance. In this world of arranged unions, the lack of choice was not merely a personal hardship, which was a reflection of a society structured around hierarchy and tradition, where individual desires were sacrificed for the collective good. As the seasons changed and years unfolded, the ritual of arranged marriage remained a fixture in medieval Japanese life. The lack of autonomy experienced by young women was deeply ingrained, woven into the very fabric of society. Their futures were sealed through decisions made by parents and elders, decisions that prioritized family alliances, political gain, and social standing over personal choice. The pressures to conform were immense. The girl who resisted risked more than just familial disappointment. She faced the possibility of exile from her own community, a harsh reality in a society where reputation and honor governed every interaction. The weight of these social expectations served as an invisible chain, binding women to paths chosen for them. Marriage negotiations were often complex and delicate, involving careful discussions between families, with dowries and land exchanged. As tokens of commitment, the young bride was, in essence, a symbol of the alliance, a living embodiment of her family's honor and ambitions. The loss of personal agency was accepted as a necessary sacrifice for the greater good. In many cases, the bride's perspective was entirely absent from the process. She was spoken about rather than spoken to, her future discussed as if she were a possession rather than a person. This absence of voice highlighted the stark imbalance between societal expectations and individual rights. The journey from childhood to womanhood was marked not by self-discovery, but by the burden of fulfilling roles imposed from outside. Young women were taught to suppress their own desires, to accept obedience as a virtue, and to find identity through service to their families. Their personal aspirations were often seen as secondary, or even irrelevant. Upon entering their new households, brides faced the challenge of adapting to a world where every action was scrutinized. The expectations placed on them were precise and unyielding. They were to maintain harmony within the home, uphold the family's reputation, and ensure the birth of heirs, duties that left little space for self-expression or autonomy. In some cases, the transition was particularly harsh. Women who came from different regions or families often found themselves isolated in unfamiliar surroundings, separated from the support of their natal families. The emotional toll of such isolation was profound, yet rarely acknowledged or discussed. Despite the severity of these constraints, women developed strategies to navigate their limited freedom. Some cultivated close relationships with other women in the household, forming networks of support and shared experience. These bonds provided emotional sustenance and helped mitigate the loneliness that often accompanied their roles. The rituals surrounding marriage, the ceremonies, the gift exchanges, the formal greetings offered moments of cultural continuity, but they did little to soften the realities of a life governed by obligation rather than choice. The lack of autonomy extended beyond the ceremony and into every facet of married life. Decisions about daily living, child rearing, and even personal interactions were often dictated by the husband or his family. A wife's opinion was seldom sought or valued. This absence of agency was deeply felt, but rarely challenged openly. The cultural emphasis on harmony and respect for hierarchy discouraged dissent, reinforcing the notion that a wife's duty was to comply without question. Yet, beneath this surface of compliance, the human spirit found ways to endure. The strength and resilience of these women, while often hidden from historical records, were vital to the survival and continuity of families and communities. Their stories remind us that even in the absence of choice, there can be quiet courage or determination to live with dignity within the confines imposed upon them. The societal framework that enforced arranged marriages without consent was bolstered by long-standing customs and legal codes. From an early age, young women were taught to accept their roles, their futures woven tightly with the will of their families and community leaders. The notion of personal freedom was a distant luxury one, often reserved for men, while women bore the burden of duty. Family honor was a concept that transcended individual happiness. The reputation of a household was tied not only to wealth or power but to the perceived virtue and obedience of its women. A daughter's behavior reflected on her family's standing, making it imperative that she conform to expectations. Parents, particularly fathers and mothers-in-law, played active roles in ensuring compliance. Mothers-in-law in particular could be strict enforcers of tradition, guiding the young bride in her duties and maintaining the household's hierarchy. Their influence could either be protective or oppressive, but always firm. The bride, often young and inexperienced, was thrust into a world where her agency was minimal. She learned quickly that her opinions mattered little compared to the expectations laid upon her. In this environment, emotional expression was subdued, and conformity was survival. Within this tightly controlled setting, the bonds between women sisters-in-law, servants, and friends became lifelines. These relationships offered moments of empathy and understanding, a soft refuge from the harshness of their prescribed roles. Some women found solace in cultural and religious practices. Participation in Buddhist rituals or Shinto ceremonies provided spiritual comfort and a sense of connection beyond their immediate hardships. These practices became private sanctuaries where they could seek strength and hope. Despite the lack of autonomy, many women embraced their roles with quiet dignity. They mastered the art of managing the household, nurturing children, and upholding family honor. Their labor, both visible and invisible, was essential to the fabric of medieval Japanese society. The loss of personal choice in marriage was a profound sacrifice, yet it was made within a framework that valued collective well-being over individual desires. This tension between duty and self was a defining feature of the era. As time passed, these marriages, though arranged and constrained, sometimes blossomed into relationships of mutual respect and companionship. Such unions, though rare, provided glimpses of warmth amid the rigidity. However, for many women, marriage remained a path dictated by family needs rather than personal will, a journey marked by sacrifice, endurance, and silent strength. In the serene yet unforgiving landscape of medieval Japan, the concept of marriage bore a heavy-weight, one that extended far beyond the union of two souls. It was a bond meticulously crafted by family elders and social expectation, a bond where personal autonomy was often sacrificed on the altar of duty and honor. For the young women at the heart of these arrangements, the path ahead was frequently set long before they understood what it meant to be a wife. Imagine a young girl, barely blossomed into adolescence, whose future was sealed by the decisions of her parents and clan leaders. Her days, once filled with the carefree joys of childhood, were soon to be dominated by the relentless preparations for a life she did not choose. Her identity was to be reshaped, her desires suppressed, and her fate entrusted to the alliances that her family deemed necessary for survival and prosperity. The process of arranging a marriage was a solemn negotiation, less of hearts and more of land, power, and strategic alliances. Families convened behind closed doors, discussing dowries, territories, and political advantages, treating daughters as valuable assets rather than individuals with hopes and dreams. The young girl herself was often excluded from these discussions, her voice silent amid the murmurs of elders. In a culture deeply rooted in hierarchy and obligation, this exclusion was not seen as cruelty, but as natural order. The greater good preservation of the family's honor and future overshadowed any concern for individual preference. The girl's acceptance of her role was assumed, her consent neither sought nor considered essential. When the day of the marriage arrived, it marked not just the joining of two people, but the forging of an alliance between powerful families. The young bride, clad in her ceremonial kimono layers of silk embroidered with symbols of purity and fortune, was led into her husband's home. Her heart, though unspoken, might have fluttered with uncertainty, fear, or resignation. Her new life awaited, one governed by duties far removed from personal freedom. In her new household, the young wife was expected to embody the virtues of obedience, humility, and diligence. Her days were filled with managing servants, preparing meals, caring for children, and maintaining the household's honor through impeccable behavior. Each action was observed, judged, and measured against the strict standards set by society. And the family, the husband, often years her senior, and deeply engaged in matters of governance, warfare, or estate management, expected unwavering loyalty and support. Emotional intimacy was a luxury rarely afforded. The marriage was a duty fulfilled, a role played with the utmost seriousness. The wife's desires, feelings, and aspirations were secondary, often buried beneath layers of social expectation. This dynamic was enforced not only by the husband, but by the extended family, particularly the mother-in-law, who wielded significant influence within the household. The mother-in-law was both a guardian of tradition and an enforcer of discipline. She guided the young bride through her duties with a firm hand, ensuring that the family's honor remained unblemished. Any sign of dissent or inadequacy could lead to reprimand, isolation, or worse, the young bride's world became increasingly insular. Her contact with her natal family was limited, and her social interactions constrained by the expectations of propriety and obedience. This isolation deepened her dependence on the household's internal dynamics, where survival often meant acquiescence and endurance. Yet, despite the rigid control, women found subtle ways to assert their presence and influence. Through quiet negotiation, tactful management of household affairs, and nurturing relationships with their children, wives could carve out spaces of power within their circumscribed roles. The upbringing of sons was particularly significant, as these children would carry on the family name and legacy, making the mother's role in their early life a critical one. The emotional toll of these constrained lives was immense. Feelings of loneliness, frustration, and longing were common, though rarely voiced. The marriage, arranged and enforced by societal norms, left little room for emotional fulfillment or personal growth. Many women faced their circumstances with silent resignation, their spirits enduring in the face of unyielding expectations. Within this context, the concept of love was often relegated to the realm of fantasy or whispered secrecy. Genuine affection between husband and wife was rare, and when it did exist, it was usually a fragile and private bond, hidden beneath layers of duty and decorum. The prevailing view saw marriage as a contract necessary, strategic, and devoid of personal passion. Despite this, women's resilience was a quiet but powerful force. They found comfort and strength in spiritual practices, turning to Buddhism and Shinto rituals for solace and guidance. These practices provided a refuge from their daily hardships and a means to connect with something beyond the confines of their roles. Furthermore, women forged strong bonds with other women's friends, sisters-in-law, and neighbors, creating networks of support that eased the weight of isolation. These relationships were lifelines, offering empathy, companionship, and sometimes a whisper of rebellion against the oppressive structures that defined their lives. The societal emphasis on harmony and respect for hierarchy discouraged open resistance, but the subtle acts of defiance, small gestures, withheld compliance, and private expressions of discontent revealed the undercurrents of agency that women maintained. These acts, though often unseen, were significant expressions of individuality and courage. In the broader picture, forced marriages and lack of autonomy for young women were reflections of a society that valued collective stability over personal freedom. The sacrifices demanded of these women were seen as necessary for the preservation of family honor and social order. Their stories, often lost to history, speak of endurance and strength. They remind us that even in systems that deny choice and suppress voice, the human spirit finds ways to survive, adapt, and assert itself. As the days turned into months, and the months into years, the reality of forced marriages settled deeply into the lives of countless young women across medieval Japan. The marriage that was once a distant arrangement, decided in hushed negotiations between families, became the very fabric of their existence, a daily ritual of sacrifice and submission. For many, the transition from daughter to wife was abrupt and profound. They left behind the familiar comforts of their natal homes, the gentle embrace of their mothers, the playful laughter of siblings, and the warmth of childhood friendships too. Enter households where their every move was observed and controlled. This separation was not merely physical, but deeply emotional, severing ties that once nurtured their sense of self. In the early days of marriage, young brides faced the daunting task of adapting to a new world filled with expectations they had scarcely imagined. Their husbands, often distant and preoccupied with the affairs of their clan or land, offered little in the way of companionship or emotional support. The wife's role was clearly defined: to manage the household, serve her husband, and bear heirs, preferably sons, to ensure the continuation of the family line. The pressure to produce children was immense. Fertility was not simply a personal matter, but a social duty. Women who failed to conceive quickly were often viewed with suspicion or pity, their worth questioned within the unforgiving framework of family honor. The birth of a son was celebrated as a triumph, while the arrival of daughters, though cherished, could not carry the same weight of expectation. This biological imperative bound women tightly to their roles, often at great personal cost. Pregnancy and childbirth were perilous endeavors in medieval times, and yet women were expected to endure repeated pregnancies with little rest or relief. Their health, emotional or physical, was secondary to their function as bearers of the family's legacy. Within the household, women were also expected to uphold strict standards of behavior and decorum. Modesty, humility, and obedience were prized virtues, and deviation from these ideals could result in harsh reprimands or social consequences. The family's reputation hinged on the wife's conduct, making any misstep a source of potential disgrace. The social fabric of the time reinforced these constraints. The extended family, including in-laws and elders, played active roles in monitoring and guiding the behavior of the wife. Mothers-in-law, in particular, wielded significant influence, often serving as enforcers of tradition and discipline. Their approval or disapproval could significantly affect the young bride's standing within the household. Isolation was a common experience for many married women, cut off from their natal families and limited in their social interactions. Their world shrank to the confines of the household and its immediate community. This physical and emotional isolation deepened their dependence on the family into which they had married, further limiting their autonomy. Despite these challenges, women found ways to endure and assert themselves within the constraints imposed upon them. Some cultivated close relationships with other women's servants, sisters-in-law, or trusted confidants, creating networks of support and solidarity. These bonds provided crucial emotional sustenance and moments of shared understanding. Others turned inward, finding strength in spiritual practices. Buddhism and Shintoism offered rituals and beliefs that helped women cope with their circumstances, providing hope for spiritual liberation or solace in the face of worldly suffering. Prayer, meditation, and participation in religious ceremonies became acts of quiet resistance and self-preservation. The complex dynamics of power and submission within marriage also gave rise to subtle forms of negotiation. Women who were intelligent and politically savvy learned to navigate the household's power structures with tact and diplomacy. By managing servants, advising on family matters, and influencing the education of children, they carved out spheres of influence that, while limited, were significant. These women understood that outright defiance was often dangerous, but that patience, resilience, and strategic action could yield small victories. Their influence, though rarely recorded in history's grand narratives, was vital to the survival and prosperity of their families. The lack of autonomy experienced by young women in medieval Japanese marriages was not simply a personal tragedy. It was a reflection of the societal values and structures that prioritized family honor and social order above individual freedom. These marriages were contracts designed to maintain and enhance the power of clans, ensuring stability in a world marked by political intrigue and shifting alliances. Yet, within these confines, the human spirit found ways to persist. The quiet courage of women who endured, adapted, and sometimes resisted speaks to a strength that transcended their circumstances. Their lives were shaped by loss and sacrifice, but also by love, hope, and resilience. As we reflect on the practice of forced marriages and the absence of choice, we are reminded of the profound impact such systems have on individual lives. The stories of these women, often untold or overshadowed by the dominant narratives of history, reveal the personal costs of social structures that limit freedom. Their legacy is a testament to endurance and strength, a silent fortitude of those who navigated worlds where their voices were constrained but their spirits remained unbroken. In the gentle glow of evening, as lanterns flicker and the night deepens over ancient Japan, we honor the lives of these women, their sacrifices, their struggles, and their quiet strength. Their stories invite us to contemplate the value of autonomy, the power of choice, and the enduring human desire for dignity and respect. In the hushed chambers of medieval Japanese homes, where the soft glow of lanterns flickered against lacquered screens, a silent sorrow often lingered, hidden beneath the decorum of duty and tradition. Behind the poised gestures and carefully practiced smiles, many women grappled with profound loneliness, a quiet ache born from the vast gulf between expectation and personal desire. Marriage in this era was largely transactional, a union forged to serve family alliances and secure social standing. For the majority of women, love, the deep personal connection that today might be seen as the foundation of marriage, was a distant and often unattainable ideal. The bonds that tied husband and wife were woven not from affection or passion, but from obligation, societal pressure, and necessity. Imagine a young bride, stepping timidly into her new home, surrounded by strangers and burdened with the weight of expectations she barely understands. Her husband, often older and preoccupied with his duties outside the home, offers little more than formal greetings. The warmth of shared moments is rare, replaced by an atmosphere of distance and silence. The wife's days become a cycle of chores, rituals, and dutiful service, managing the household, bearing children, and maintaining the family's honor. Her voice is seldom heard beyond the walls of the home. Her feelings, hopes, and fears are kept locked away, concealed beneath layers of social expectation. This emotional isolation was compounded by the physical separation from her natal family. Once married, a woman's contact with her birth family was often limited, leaving her to navigate the complexities of her new household alone. The familiar comfort of childhood relationships was replaced by the cold formality of a husband's family, where her place was constantly under scrutiny. Within this confined world, loneliness was a frequent companion. The absence of genuine companionship and affection created a void that was difficult to fill. Many women found themselves surrounded by others, yet profoundly alone, held captive by the invisible chains of duty and silence. Yet, despite the transactional nature of marriage, the human heart's longing for connection could not be entirely extinguished. In rare moments of quiet, some couples discovered a tentative affection, a fragile bridge between two isolated souls. These moments, though fleeting, offered glimpses of warmth in an otherwise cold landscape. Such connections were often nurtured over years of shared experiences through the raising of children, mutual respect, or the recognition of common hardships. But for most, these bonds remained underdeveloped, overshadowed by the primacy of duty and societal expectation. The emotional toll on women was profound. The weight of suppressing personal desires, the constant pressure to conform, and the lack of intimate companionship often led to deep feelings of despair and resignation. Their lives were a balancing act between survival and the quiet, yearning for something more. Isolation extended beyond emotional realms into the social fabric of the household. Women's interactions were frequently limited to other women in the household or village, further restricting their emotional and social worlds. This confinement heightened the sense of loneliness, as the opportunity for meaningful connection was scarce. In the rare cases where women found solace outside the family through friendships, artistic pursuits, or religious devotion, these moments were precious sanctuaries. Yet, the pervasive societal norms often discouraged overt displays of individuality or emotional expression, reinforcing the culture of silence. The concept of love as a mutual nurturing force was largely absent from the institution of marriage. During this time, instead, love was often relegated to a private, almost secret realm, expressed through small gestures, whispered prayers, or the tender care of children. For many women, these moments of affection were the only reprieve from the rigidity of their roles. The world of medieval Japanese marriage was often a place where love was sacrificed to duty. and the human need for connection was subdued beneath the weight of societal expectation. The absence of affection and the overwhelming loneliness experienced by many wives carved deep emotional voids, voids that few could voice or heal. For many women, marriage was a profound transition from the familiarity and warmth of their natal homes to the austere and often cold environments of their husbands' households. This shift was more than physical, it was an emotional exile. The women were uprooted from the comfort of their birth families and thrust into foreign environments where they were strangers, expected to adapt and conform without complaint. The emotional landscape of these women was shaped by isolation, where the simple acts of companionship and understanding were scarce. The walls of their homes often echoed with silence or the muted sounds of daily chores, a stark contrast to the vibrant emotional lives they might have longed for. Yet, even in this emotional solitude, women sought meaning and connection. Some turned to the children they bore as sources of love and purpose. The maternal bond became a sanctuary, a place where affection could be expressed freely and openly, offering relief from the constraints of their marriages. The love for children was often the most tangible and transformative emotional experience. For these women, in nurturing their offspring, they found a measure of agency and fulfillment. Raising a child was not merely a duty but a deeply personal and powerful connection that could transcend the loneliness of their marital lives. However, the pressure to produce male heirs added another layer of emotional complexity. Sons were highly prized, seen as carriers of the family name and protectors of the lineage. The birth of a daughter, while welcomed, did not carry the same societal weight, often leaving women who bore only daughters feeling a quiet despair or fear of diminished status. The lack of emotional intimacy with their husbands further compounded the feelings of loneliness. The men, bound by their own duties and social expectations, often remained distant, preoccupied with matters of governance, warfare, or family honor. Their interactions with their wives were formal, sometimes even cold, reducing the relationship to one of convenience and necessity. In this context, the concept of romantic love was largely absent from the marital experience. Instead, love was a rare and fragile emotion, often confined to private moments or fleeting exchanges. Some women found comfort in subtle gestures, shared glances, small acts of kindness, or the quiet understanding born from years of shared hardship. These moments, while infrequent, offered glimpses of warmth and humanity in otherwise restrictive relationships. They were the threads of affection that, when woven carefully, could sustain a fragile bond between husband and wife. Yet, for many women, the emotional toll of their marriages was heavy. The constant suppression of personal desires, the absence of mutual affection, and the pervasive loneliness took a deep toll on their mental and emotional well-being. Feelings of sadness, frustration, and despair were common, though rarely spoken aloud. The cultural expectation to maintain harmony and honor left little room for emotional expression or vulnerability. Women were expected to bear their burdens silently, to uphold the family's reputation without complaint. The fear of bringing shame to their families further silenced their voices, trapping many in cycles of isolation. Social interactions were limited, further exacerbating feelings of loneliness. Women's movements were often restricted, their relationships monitored and controlled. Opportunities for companionship or friendship outside the family were few, leaving many isolated even within their communities. Despite these constraints, some women sought solace in creative and spiritual outlets. Poetry, calligraphy, and other arts provided a means of personal expression, a way to channel emotions that could not be openly shared. Religious devotion, particularly through Buddhism and Shinto practices, offered comfort and a sense of connection to something greater. The practice of writing poetry, for instance, allowed women to articulate feelings of longing, loss, and hope. In a society that demanded silence, these artistic expressions were both private acts of resistance and enduring legacies that provide modern readers glimpses into their inner lives. Religious rituals and prayers offered a sanctuary where women could seek peace and strength. Participation in temple ceremonies or quiet meditation provided moments of relief from their daily struggles, fostering a sense of spiritual resilience. The friendships that women cultivated within their households or villages also played a vital role in mitigating loneliness. Through shared experiences and mutual support, women built networks that provided emotional sustenance and practical assistance. These bonds of sisterhood, though often overlooked in historical records, were lifelines. They created spaces of empathy and understanding where women could share their fears and hopes without judgment. In contrast, the absence of such support networks could deepen despair, leaving women vulnerable to emotional distress. The isolation imposed by social norms was a formidable barrier to mental well-being. Throughout these struggles, the emotional landscape of medieval Japanese marriages remained complex and often contradictory. While many marriages were transactional and devoid of love, the human need for connection persisted. Women found ways to nurture affection and meaning within the narrow confines of their roles. The emotional sacrifice inherent in these marriages was profound. Love, companionship, and personal fulfillment were frequently surrendered for the sake of duty and survival. Yet, within this sacrifice lay a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. The stories of these women, though often silent in the annals of history, echo through time as powerful reminders of endurance. They reveal the cost of societal expectations and the profound strength required to live and love within such constraints. As night falls over the land, and the soft light of lanterns casts gentle shadows, we can imagine the quiet sorrow and steadfast courage of these women. Their lives were marked by loneliness and isolation, but also by moments of tenderness and hope. Their stories invite us to reflect on the true nature of love and connection, and the ways in which duty and desire can collide. In the stillness of the night, as rivers flow endlessly and the world rests beneath the stars, the emotional echoes of these marriages remind us of the enduring need for compassion, understanding, and freedom. That the emotional landscape of medieval Japanese marriages was often marked by profound contrasts between public duty and private yearning, between outward obedience and inner turmoil. While the social framework demanded silence and submission, the hearts of women told stories of loneliness, longing, and quiet resilience. Many women entered marriage as young girls, their futures arranged before they could understand the gravity of what awaited them. Their lives became a series of roles dictated by others, their personal dreams and desires buried beneath layers of expectation. The youthful excitement of new beginnings was often replaced by a heavy sense of loss, the loss of freedom, identity, and autonomy. Inside the household, women frequently found themselves isolated, not only physically but emotionally. Their husbands, absorbed in their own obligations and pursuits, were distant figures. The warmth and intimacy that might have been expected in a marital relationship were often absent, replaced by formality and duty. This emotional distance deepened the sense of loneliness. Many women spent their days managing the household and raising children, yet their emotional needs were unmet. The absence of companionship and affection created a void that few could fill. The cultural norms of the time discouraged open expression of emotion, especially for women. Displaying dissatisfaction or sadness was often seen as a failure to uphold family honor. Women learned to hide their feelings, presenting a composed exterior even as their hearts ached. Loneliness, then, became a silent companion, a constant presence in the lives of many wives. It was a loneliness compounded by the absence of personal choice and the constraints placed upon their social interactions. Women were often restricted from forming close relationships outside their immediate families, and their movements were closely monitored. Yet, within this loneliness, moments of tenderness and affection sometimes flickered. Though rare, some marriages grew into partnerships where mutual respect and care developed over time. These relationships, built slowly and cautiously, offered glimpses of emotional connection and shared understanding. The love that did exist was often subtle and understated, expressed through small acts of kindness, shared responsibilities, or quiet support. These moments, though infrequent, could provide emotional sustenance and a sense of belonging. For many women, love was primarily found in their children. The maternal bond was a source of profound joy and purpose. In nurturing their offspring, women found a way to channel their emotional energy and express the love that society often denied them elsewhere. The birth of children, particularly sons, was celebrated as the fulfillment of a wife's duty, yet this role also carried immense pressure. Women were expected to bear heirs who would continue the family line and uphold its honor. The physical and emotional toll of repeated pregnancies and childbirths was immense, often exacerbated by the lack of emotional support. This relentless focus on duty over desire left many women emotionally depleted. The suppression of personal feelings and the prioritization of family needs created a fertile ground for sorrow and despair. Though such emotions were rarely voiced, isolation was also a consequence of the social hierarchy within households. Women's interactions were often limited to other women in the family or servants. These relationships could provide comfort, but also reinforced the boundaries of their restricted world. Friendships and support networks among women became essential for survival. In the shared experiences of hardship and duty, women found solidarity and empathy. These connections offered emotional relief and a sense of community within the confines of their constrained lives. The spiritual life of women also provided a refuge. Participation in religious rituals and practices offered moments of peace and hope. Buddhism and Shintoism, with their teachings on suffering, impermanence, and compassion, helped women cope with their emotional struggles. Through prayer, meditation, and ritual, women sought strength beyond the material world. These spiritual practices nurtured resilience and offered a framework to understand and endure their circumstances. The arts also played a role in emotional expression. Poetry, calligraphy, and music allowed women to articulate feelings they could not openly share. These creative outlets became a language of the heart, conveying longing, loss, and hope through beauty. The duality of medieval Japanese marriage, where duty and desire were often in conflict, created complex emotional dynamics. Women learned to navigate this landscape with grace, finding ways to preserve their sense of self amid silence and submission. While the transactional nature of marriage dominated, the human need for connection persisted. Women's hearts sought love, understanding, and companionship, even in the most restrictive circumstances. The stories of love, loneliness, and isolation within these marriages remind us that beneath the surface of social duty lies the enduring quest for emotional fulfillment. The strength of these women lies not only in their endurance, but in their capacity to love and hope, despite overwhelming constraints. As night falls over the ancient homes, the flicker of lantern light casts gentle shadows on the wall, shadows that dance with the memories of whispered prayers, stolen moments, and quiet tears. In the stillness, we hear the silent voices of these women, their sorrows, their resilience, and their unyielding spirit. Their stories, though often hidden, are woven into the fabric of history, reminding us of the profound emotional cost of a life lived in service and silence. Within the veiled corners of medieval Japanese households, where the muted glow of paper lanterns cast dancing shadows on sliding doors, the inner worlds of many women remained cloaked in silence. These women, bound by the strictures of arranged marriage and societal expectation, faced emotional landscapes shaped as much by absence as presence. Their days were punctuated by ritual and duty, the careful preparation of meals, the management of servants, the instruction of children. But between these tasks lay stretches of solitude that could feel as vast as the countryside itself. The echo of their own thoughts, the quiet of empty rooms, and the weight of unspoken desires created a profound sense of loneliness. Loneliness in this context was not merely a physical state, but an emotional one, a sense of separation from intimacy, companionship, and the freedom to express one's true self. The women often carried their burdens alone, their feelings hidden behind masks of composure and obedience. The isolation was compounded by the expectations of silence. Society demanded that wives accept their roles without complaint, that they suppress personal pain and submit gracefully to the will of their husbands and families. To voice dissatisfaction was to risk shame and discord, both dangerous in a culture where honor governed every interaction. In these marriages, love was frequently sacrificed on the altar of duty. The notion of romantic love, as understood in modern times, was a rarity, often dismissed as frivolous or inappropriate. Instead, the primary function of marriage was to secure family alliances, ensure progeny, and uphold social order. For many women, this meant that affection, if it existed, was fleeting and fragile. The husbands, absorbed in affairs of governance or warfare, often offered little emotional presence. Their relationships with their wives were formal, sometimes distant, rarely nurturing. The absence of mutual affection deepened the emotional gulf between spouses. Women who yearned for companionship and warmth found themselves confined within walls that echoed with silence and duty. This emotional deprivation could lead to feelings of despair, invisibility, and emotional numbness. Yet, despite these constraints, moments of tenderness occasionally broke through. Some couples developed bonds of respect and quiet understanding over time, their shared experiences weaving threads of connection. These relationships, though often overshadowed by social expectation, offered glimpses of love and companionship. The birth of children, especially sons, provided another avenue for emotional connection. The maternal bond became a source of comfort and purpose. Women poured their love into raising their offspring, finding meaning in nurturing the next generation, even as their own desires were suppressed. However, the relentless pressure to produce heirs, combined with the dangers of childbirth in medieval times, exacted a heavy toll. Many women faced repeated pregnancies with little respite, their bodies and spirits taxed by the demands of family continuity. The emotional strain was often compounded by the rigid social roles women were expected to inhabit. Their identities were closely tied to their duties as wives and mothers, leaving little room for personal growth or exploration. The sacrifices they made, while essential to family survival, came at the cost of their own well-being. Isolation also stemmed from the limitations on social interaction. Women's movements were restricted, and contact with outsiders, especially unrelated men, was discouraged. This further narrowed their worlds, confining them to domestic spheres where their roles were tightly defined. Within these confines, relationships with other women servants, relatives, and neighbors became vital. These bonds provided emotional support and solidarity, creating small communities of shared experience and understanding. Women often found strength and comfort in religious and cultural practices. Buddhism and Shintoism offered spiritual solace, with rituals and prayers providing a means to cope with hardship and seek hope beyond their immediate realities. Artistic pursuits, such as poetry and calligraphy, also offered avenues for emotional expression. Through these creative outlets, women articulated feelings that society silenced, crafting personal narratives of longing, love, and loss. The dual realities of duty and desire created complex emotional tensions within these marriages. Women navigated a world where their voices were constrained, yet their hearts sought connection and fulfillment. The stories of love, loneliness, and isolation in medieval Japanese marriages revealed the resilience of the human spirit. Despite systemic constraints, women found ways to endure, express affection, and nurture hope. As night deepens over ancient Japan, the soft glow of lanterns illuminates the silent strength of these women, their sacrifices, their hidden joys, and their enduring courage. Their lives invite reflection on the profound emotional cost of societal expectation, and the timeless human yearning for love and connection. In the quiet, sun-dappled rooms of a medieval Japanese home, the soft rustle of silk and the faint scent of incense were constant companions to a deeper, often unspoken solitude. Women who had entered into marriages arranged long before their voices could be heard, now lived lives where personal desires were subdued beneath the weight of obligation. From the very first moments after their wedding ceremonies, affairs filled with ritual but often devoid of personal joy, these women faced the stark reality of their new existence. Their homes, though adorned with beauty and tradition, could become prisons of silence. The bustling world outside contrasted sharply with the isolation inside, where expectations and duty created invisible yet unyielding walls. The emotional chasm between husband and wife often went unacknowledged. Husbands preoccupied with duties that ranged from managing estates to fulfilling samurai obligations were distant figures. Their presence in the home was frequently limited, their interactions formal and restrained. This created an emotional vacuum that left many wives feeling unseen and unheard. Within the home, the expectations were clear and rigid. A wife was to be obedient, diligent, and uncomplaining. Expressing dissatisfaction was dangerous, risking social disgrace and familial reprimand. Women learned early to conceal their true feelings, cultivating a calm exterior that masked a tumult of loneliness, longing, and sometimes despair. The suppression of emotional expression was a survival strategy. To maintain the family's honor and cohesion, women endured hardship silently, becoming masters of discretion and endurance. Yet beneath this composed surface, the yearning for connection and affection remained a persistent undercurrent of human need. Isolation was compounded by the strict social controls placed on women's movements and interactions. Contact with people outside the immediate household, especially unrelated men, was limited or forbidden. Even relationships with other women were often mediated by social hierarchy and expectations, narrowing the circle of trusted companionship. Within this confined social world, relationships with children often provided the most profound source of emotional fulfillment. Motherhood was not only a duty but a deeply personal and transformative experience. The love a mother felt for her children was one of the few outlets for genuine affection and connection in an otherwise constrained life. However, the responsibilities of motherhood were immense. Women bore multiple pregnancies with little respite, enduring the physical risks and emotional strains associated with childbirth and children. The success of the family and, by extension, the woman's worth was often measured by her ability to produce male heirs. The pressure to fulfill these expectations was relentless. Failure, whether real or perceived, could lead to harsh judgment, alienation within the family, or diminished social status. These pressures intensified the emotional isolation many women experienced, as their value was tightly linked to their reproductive success. Despite these challenges, moments of tenderness and affection did arise, albeit often hidden and fragile. Some marriages evolved over time into partnerships marked by mutual respect and understanding. These relationships, while rare, offered brief respite from the emotional solitude that characterized much of married life. Small gestures, a shared glance, a whispered word, an act of kindness became lifelines for women navigating the emotional complexities of their roles. These moments, though fleeting, illuminated the possibility of love and connection within the constraints of tradition. Art and spirituality also played crucial roles in women's emotional lives. Poetry, calligraphy, and music provided means of expression and solace, allowing women to articulate feelings that society demanded they suppress. The written word and artistic creation became private languages of longing, hope, and sorrow. Religious devotion offered another sanctuary. Participation in Buddhist and Shinto rituals connected women to spiritual communities and beliefs that transcended their immediate hardships. Prayer and meditation provided strength, comfort, and a sense of agency in an otherwise constrained existence. The emotional toll of these marriages was profound, yet the resilience demonstrated by women was equally remarkable. Their ability to endure, adapt, and find moments of joy and connection speaks to the indomitable nature of the human spirit. Their stories, often absent from the grand narratives of history, remind us of the complex realities faced by women. In societies that prioritize duty over desire, they reveal the costs of social structures that constrain personal freedom and the enduring hope that sustains even the most confined lives. As night descends over the ancient homes and temples, the silent strength of these women lingers like a whispered prayer. Their lives, marked by love, loneliness, sacrifice, and endurance, are threads woven into the rich tapestry of Japan's history. Their emotional journeys invite us to reflect on the timeless human need for connection, the pain of isolation, and the quiet courage required to live with dignity amid constraint. On the stillness of the night, as the world sleeps beneath a sky of stars, the echoes of their lives remind us that even in silence, the heart speaks volumes. In the soft embrace of twilight, as the lanterns flickered and shadows stretched long across the polished floors, the emotional isolation that many women endured within their marriages became most profound. Their lives, while outwardly composed and dutiful, were often steeped in quiet sorrow and unfulfilled longing. The young bride, once full of hope or curiosity, found herself enveloped in a world where her feelings were rarely acknowledged. Her husband, bound by the strict roles society assigned him, was often distant, his attention consumed by duties outside the home. The emotional connection that might have blossomed between them was frequently left to wither in the absence of warmth or affection. Loneliness seeped into the corners of the household. The wife's days were filled with tasks and responsibilities, yet her heart yearned for companionship, connection deeper than the formal exchanges dictated by social custom. The silence between husband and wife was heavy, a barrier neither dared to cross openly. This profound solitude was compounded by the expectation that a wife would remain patient and silent, carrying her burdens without complaint. To voice dissatisfaction was to risk dishonor, both personal and familial. Thus, many women locked away their emotions, presenting an exterior of calm compliance, while wrestling with inner turmoil. The social structure that demanded such silence also restricted women's ability to seek support beyond their immediate family. Their movements and interactions were tightly controlled, and friendships outside the household were often limited. This confinement deepened the emotional void, leaving many women isolated even within their communities. In this loneliness, some women found solace in the company of other women, servants, sisters-in-law, or neighbors who shared similar experiences. These relationships became vital sources of empathy and strength. Through whispered conversations and shared tasks, they created fragile networks of support, offering moments of understanding in an otherwise isolating world. Religious and spiritual practices provided another refuge. Participation in temple ceremonies, prayer, and meditation offered women a way to connect with something greater than themselves. These rituals fostered a sense of hope and resilience, helping them to endure the hardships of their emotional confinement. The arts, too, became an essential outlet for emotional expression. Poetry, calligraphy, and music allowed women to articulate feelings that were otherwise suppressed. These creative pursuits were acts of both beauty and defiance, the means to voice longing, sorrow, and hope in a society that often demanded silence. Within this emotional landscape, the concept of love was complex and often contradictory. While marriages were arranged for political and social reasons, the human heart's need for affection and connection persisted. Some couples developed bonds of respect and tenderness, their relationship evolving slowly through shared experience. Yet, for many, love remained elusive, sacrificed in favor of duty and survival. The emotional sacrifices women made were profound, their personal happiness often subordinated to the needs of family and society. The emotional isolation and lack of affection in these marriages left deep scars. Feelings of sadness, longing, and sometimes despair were common, yet rarely discussed. The pressure to maintain appearances and uphold family honor silenced many voices. Despite these challenges, the resilience of these women shines through history. Their endurance, their quiet strength, and their capacity for love, whether expressed openly or kept hidden, are testaments to the complexity of human emotion within the confines of societal expectation. As night deepened over ancient Japan, and the world outside grew still, the silent prayers and whispered hopes of these women echoed softly in the shadows. Their stories, often overlooked, are woven into the rich fabric of history, a reminder of the emotional cost of duty and the enduring human spirit. In the end, the tale of love, loneliness, and isolation within medieval Japanese marriages is one of survival. It is a story of sacrifice, endurance, and the quiet yearning for connection that defines us all. Their lives, though shaped by the harsh realities of their time, speak across the centuries, inviting us to reflect on the importance of empathy, understanding, and the universal desire for love and belonging. In the elegant yet rigid world of medieval Japanese marriage, where duty and honor formed the foundation of every union, there existed an unspoken reality, one of infidelity and betrayal. Though fidelity was an ideal held high in society's teachings, the lived experience of many marriages told a more complex story, marked by contradictions, double standards, and quiet suffering. Imagine the tranquil gardens and serene courtyards, where noble families lived a world outwardly peaceful, yet beneath its polished surface simmered tensions shaped by desires, power, and social expectation. In this world, the concept of loyalty in marriage was nuanced and often unequal. For women, fidelity was an absolute expectation. Their roles as wives were defined by obedience and purity, their virtue closely guarded as a symbol of family honor. Any hint of infidelity could bring devastating consequences, not only personal disgrace, but shame that spread through the family and community. The societal code was unforgiving for women who strayed Betrayal by a wife was seen as a direct attack on the family's honor and the legitimacy of heirs. Punishments could be severe, including social ostracism, divorce, or worse. The woman's transgression was not seen merely as a personal failing, but as a stain upon her entire lineage. Men, however, lived within a different set of expectations. While fidelity was professed as a virtue, men, especially those of higher status, often enjoyed greater latitude. Affairs, liaisons with courtesans, or relationships with women outside the marriage were tacitly accepted, if not openly overlooked. This double standard was rooted in the patriarchal structure of society, where men's power and status afforded them freedoms denied to their wives. Male infidelity was often tolerated as a reflection of their social position, rather than a betrayal of their marital vows. The existence of concubines, for example, was a common and accepted practice among the samurai and noble classes. These women, while not wives in the formal sense, held recognized positions within the household and bore children who could sometimes be acknowledged in the family lineage. Despite this acceptance, male infidelity was not without consequence. While men might evade social censure, the emotional damage to their wives was profound. Women were expected to endure the humiliation silently, maintaining their duties while concealing their pain. The presence of concubines and affairs complicated family dynamics. Wives navigated relationships not only with their husbands, but with these other women, often forming uneasy alliances or rivalries. The household became a delicate balancing act, where emotions ran deep beneath the surface of rigid social roles. In many cases, wives bore the brunt of the emotional betrayal. Their status diminished, even as their husbands' actions were overlooked. The loneliness of betrayal compounded the isolation that many women already experienced within marriage. Within the stately homes of medieval Japan, the dichotomy between expectation and reality in marriage was never more evident than in the realm of fidelity. The ideal of unwavering loyalty was championed in public and enshrined in codes of conduct. Yet behind closed doors, the human heart often wandered into complex and painful territories. For women, fidelity was a sacred, non-negotiable virtue. A wife's honor was measured by her chastity and devotion, her ability to uphold the family's reputation and provide legitimate heirs. Any breach was not merely a personal failing but a betrayal that cast shadows over the entire lineage. The consequences of infidelity for women were severe. A wife accused or suspected of unfaithfulness could face social exile, divorce, or worse, loss of her children and standing in the community. The stigma attached to such transgressions was deep and enduring, often irreparable. The pressure to maintain a flawless reputation was immense. Women lived under constant scrutiny, their actions watched closely by husbands, mothers-in-law, and society at large. The fear of accusation or gossip shaped their behavior and reinforced the strict boundaries placed upon their lives. In stark contrast, men's relationships outside of marriage were often met with tolerance or acceptance, especially among the upper classes. Samurai and noblemen maintained relationships with concubines or courtesans, arrangements that were woven into the fabric of social life. These liaisons, while unofficial, were acknowledged parts of the household. Concubines lived within the home, cared for by servants, and bore children who sometimes played significant roles in the family's future. Though not afforded the status of formal wives, these women occupied a recognized and complicated position. Male infidelity was often justified by societal norms that emphasized male dominance and privilege. Men were seen as agents of the family's power, their actions beyond reproach in many ways. Their extramarital affairs were considered an extension of their status, rather than a betrayal. Yet the emotional repercussions for the wives were profound. They bore the invisible scars of neglect and betrayal, their dignity challenged by the knowledge of their husband's infidelity. Socially expected to accept and conceal these wounds, many women suffered in silence. The presence of concubines and lovers introduced complexities within the household. Rivalries and tensions could flare between wives and these women, each navigating their precarious positions. The wife, though the official spouse, might find herself sidelined emotionally and politically within her own home. Children born of these relationships further complicated matters. Questions of legitimacy, inheritance, and affection interwove with social expectations. Wives sometimes found themselves in fraught positions. managing relationships with stepchildren, and maintaining their own maternal roles under challenging circumstances. These dynamics fostered environments of emotional turbulence beneath the surface of decorum. Women navigated these treacherous waters with caution, often hiding their feelings behind masks of composure. The loneliness of betrayal was compounded by the isolation inherent in their roles. Some women found subtle ways to reclaim agency, using their positions within the household to influence decisions or negotiate better treatment. Others sought solace in religious devotion, art, or confidence, building quiet networks of support and understanding. Despite societal acceptance of male infidelity, the emotional cost was undeniable. Women's resilience was tested daily as they balanced their duties with their hidden wounds. The strain of living with betrayal, while maintaining appearances, was a testament to their strength. The unspoken realities of marriage infidelity, betrayal, and silence formed a shadowed backdrop to the lives of medieval Japanese women. These hidden struggles reveal the profound gap between societal ideals and lived experiences. Through it all, women endured, their spirits both constrained and unbroken. Their stories, though often muted by history, speak to the complexities of love, loyalty, and survival in a world shaped by rigid hierarchies. The emotional landscape of infidelity within these marriages invites reflection on the nature of trust, the pain of betrayal, and the enduring human need for connection and respect. As night falls over the ancient land, the quiet resilience of these women shines through the darkness, a beacon of strength. In the face of unspoken heartache, the world within medieval Japanese households was a delicate, intricate web of relationships, where loyalty and betrayal existed in constant tension. The idealized vision of marital fidelity stood in stark contrast to the reality experienced by many. For women, marriage was often a lonely path, fraught with emotional hardship and social peril, especially when confronted with the infidelity of their husbands. In the eyes of society, the wife's fidelity was paramount. It was a measure of her virtue, her family's honor, and the legitimacy of future heirs. Even a hint of impropriety could shatter reputations and destabilize familial alliances. The pressure to embody perfect virtue was immense and relentless. Women lived with the constant awareness that their behavior was scrutinized, their movements observed, and their reputations fragile. The threat of gossip and scandal was a persistent shadow, capable of destroying not just their standing but the honor of their entire family. The consequences of suspected infidelity for wives were severe. Divorce was rare and often devastating, leaving women vulnerable and stigmatized. Social ostracism was common, and a woman's value in the marriage market could be irreparably damaged. The fear of such outcomes forced many women into silence, concealing their pain and fears to protect themselves and their families. Meanwhile, the societal acceptance of male infidelity created a profound imbalance. Men of status, especially samurai and nobles, frequently engaged in relationships outside their marriages, without fear of repercussion. These liaisons were often public knowledge, yet rarely challenged. The double standard reflected the patriarchal nature of society, where men's actions were tolerated and even expected as expressions of their power. The existence of concubines was institutionalized in many households. These women, while lacking the official status of wives, were often integrated into the household's daily life. Their children could be recognized and sometimes included in inheritance lines, complicating familial dynamics. The presence of concubines and lovers introduced emotional complexities that wives had to navigate carefully. Relationships between wives and concubines ranged from cautious cooperation to fierce rivalry. In some households, concubines were granted privileges and attention that eclipsed those of the official wife, further deepening feelings of neglect and betrayal. Children born from these relationships added layers of tension and ambiguity. Issues of legitimacy, inheritance rights, and familial affection became battlegrounds where women fought to protect their own children's status and futures. The emotional toll of these struggles weighed heavily on wives, adding to their isolation and heartache. The silence surrounding infidelity was often maintained by the social imperative to preserve family honor. Open confrontation could lead to scandal, weakening the family's political or social position. Thus, many women bore their suffering privately, their voices muted by fear and necessity. Within the confines of their roles, women developed strategies to cope with the emotional pain of betrayal. Some immersed themselves in their duties, seeking purpose in managing the household and raising children. Others found solace in spiritual practices, turning to Buddhism and Shintoism for comfort and strength. Artistic expression provided another refuge. Poetry, painting, and calligraphy allowed women to articulate their emotions indirectly, creating a space for reflection and emotional release. These creative pursuits were both personal outlets and subtle acts of resistance against the silence imposed by society. The emotional burden of infidelity extended beyond the women directly involved. It affected children, family relationships, and the broader social fabric. Wives often faced the difficult task of maintaining appearances and harmony, even when their hearts were broken. The cultural ideal of loyalty and honor in marriage was thus intertwined with a harsh reality, one where love was often sacrificed, betrayal endured, and silence maintained. This contradiction defined the emotional experience of many medieval Japanese wives. Despite these challenges, women's resilience was remarkable. Their ability to endure emotional wounds, maintain dignity, and fulfill their roles speaks to the strength of the human spirit. Their stories, though often hidden, are crucial to understanding the complex realities of marriage in this era. As the evening deepens and lanterns flicker softly, the unspoken sorrows and quiet strength of these women linger in the shadows. Their lives shaped by love, betrayal, duty, and endurance continue to echo through history, reminding us of the profound complexities of human relationships. The emotional landscape of infidelity in medieval Japanese marriages was fraught with contradictions. World where societal ideals clashed painfully with human realities. The sanctity of marriage was upheld as a cornerstone of family and social order, yet the lived experience of many couples told a different story, one marked by betrayal, silence, and unspoken grief. For women, fidelity was not just a moral expectation, it was a vital element of their social identity and survival. Their entire standing in the community, their prospects for security and respect, hinged on their perceived purity and loyalty. A wife's betrayal was seen as a fracture in the family's honor, one that could ripple through generations. Women who were accused or suspected of infidelity faced devastating consequences. Divorce was a harsh reality that stripped them of social status and often left them destitute. The stigma attached to such accusations was pervasive, affecting not only the woman but also her children and natal family. This threat loomed large, compelling women to conform strictly to societal expectations, even when their hearts suffered. The pressure to maintain fidelity was compounded by the limited avenues available to women for expressing dissatisfaction or seeking emotional support. Their lives were circumscribed by social norms that demanded silence and submission. Emotional suffering was often internalized, hidden behind a facade of calm and dutiful behavior. In stark contrast, men's infidelity was frequently tolerated and even normalized within the social fabric. Samurai and noblemen often kept concubines or engaged in extramarital affairs without fear of serious repercussion. This disparity highlighted the deeply patriarchal nature of society, where men's status afforded them freedoms denied to women, was institutionalized as part of the family structure. Concubines lived within the household, sometimes alongside the wife, bearing children who could be recognized and cared for by the family. This arrangement complicated familial relationships and introduced emotional challenges that wives had to navigate carefully. The presence of concubines created an environment rife with tension and emotional complexity. Wives, though officially recognized, often found themselves competing for their husband's attention and favor. Rivalries could develop, fueled by jealousy, insecurity, and the struggle to maintain social standing within the household. Children born from these extramarital relationships further complicated family dynamics. Issues of legitimacy and inheritance created conflicts that women were frequently forced to mediate. Protecting the status of their own children required constant vigilance and negotiation, adding to their emotional burdens. Despite the acceptance of male infidelity, the emotional wounds it inflicted on wives were profound. Feelings of betrayal, loneliness, and humiliation were common, yet these emotions were rarely acknowledged openly. the societal imperative to preserve family harmony and honor suppressed expressions of pain and resentment. Women developed various coping mechanisms to endure the emotional toll. Some immersed themselves in religious devotion, finding solace in Buddhist and Shinto practices that offered spiritual comfort and a framework for understanding suffering. Rituals, prayers, and meditation became lifelines that nurtured resilience. Artistic expression also provided an essential outlet. Poetry, calligraphy, and music allowed women to channel their feelings into creative forms, offering private spaces for emotional release. These arts became vehicles for voicing grief, hope, and longing in ways that could not be spoken aloud. Within the household, women sometimes found subtle ways to assert their agency, managing the upbringing of children, influencing household affairs, and cultivating relationships with servants and relatives offered avenues for indirect power. These acts of quiet influence were vital to their sense of self and survival. However, resistance to infidelity or attempts to challenge the status quo were fraught with risk. Open confrontation could lead to social ostracism, familial conflict, or even physical punishment. Women learned to balance their desires with the harsh realities of their social environment, often prioritizing survival over confrontation. The emotional isolation experienced by many wives was deepened by the limited social networks available. To them, interactions outside the family were often restricted, and opportunities for meaningful companionship were scarce. This isolation heightened feelings of loneliness and despair. Yet, even within these confines, women's resilience shone through the strength required to endure betrayal silently, to continue fulfilling their roles with dignity, and to nurture their families despite personal pain, speaks to an enduring human spirit. The stories of infidelity and betrayal in medieval Japanese marriages reveal not only the hardships endured by women, but also the complexities of love, loyalty, and survival within rigid social structures. They remind us that beneath the surface of tradition lies a rich tapestry of human experience full of struggle, endurance, and quiet courage. As the night deepens and the flicker of lanterns illuminates the shadows, the unspoken stories of these women linger in the air, testament to lives lived with both strength and sorrow. Their legacy invites us to reflect on the nature of fidelity, the pain of betrayal, and the enduring hope for connection that defines the human heart. The world of medieval Japanese marriage, though outwardly structured by strict codes and formal alliances, was internally shaped by the complex interplay of human emotions, love, betrayal, loyalty, and loneliness. The institution of marriage was designed as a social contract, yet beneath this contract lay the fragile hearts of individuals navigating the turbulent waters of fidelity and infidelity. For wives, the pain of betrayal was often compounded by the societal double standard that excused or overlooked male indiscretions. Husbands, especially those of high status, engaged in relationships outside marriage with little fear of censure, while their wives bore the burden of unwavering fidelity. This imbalance sowed seeds of silent suffering and unspoken resentment within many households. In a society where honor was paramount, the wife's purity and loyalty were tightly guarded symbols of family prestige. Her fidelity was not only a personal virtue but a public testament to the strength and virtue of her lineage. Conversely, male infidelity was frequently rationalized as a natural extension of social power and privilege. The presence of concubines and mistresses was woven into the social fabric, especially among the samurai and noble classes. These women, while occupying secondary roles, held complex positions within the household hierarchy. They could bear children, influence domestic affairs, and at times rival the official wife in status and affection. This arrangement created a delicate and often fraught balance within the family. Wives navigated relationships fraught with jealousy, competition, and complex alliances. Their roles extended beyond domestic management to include maintaining social harmony amidst emotional turmoil. The emotional cost of this arrangement was significant. Women endured the humiliation and pain of their husbands' infidelities in silence, their own feelings suppressed by the imperatives of duty and honor. The emotional isolation was profound, as expressing grief or anger could threaten the fragile social order and the stability of the family. Children born from extramarital relationships introduced further complications. Issues of legitimacy and inheritance sparked tensions that women had to manage delicately. Protecting the status of their own children became a vital, often stressful responsibility, adding to their emotional burdens. Despite these challenges, women developed resilience and subtle forms of influence. They learned to assert power through managing household affairs, guiding the education of children, and fostering alliances with other family members. Their strength often lay in quiet, diplomacy and emotional endurance. Religious and cultural practices offered women spiritual refuge. Buddhism and Shintoism, with their teachings on impermanence, suffering, and compassion, provided frameworks for understanding and coping with the pain of betrayal and the complexities of marriage. Artistic expression also played a critical role in women's emotional lives. Poetry, music, and calligraphy allowed women to convey emotions that were otherwise suppressed. These creative outlets became private forms of resistance, enabling them to express longing, sorrow, and hope. The unspoken realities of infidelity shaped not only individual marriages, but also the broader social and cultural landscape. They revealed the tensions inherent in a system that upheld ideals of loyalty, while accommodating human frailty and social hierarchy. Women's stories of endurance in the face of betrayal highlight the complex interplay between personal suffering and social expectation. Their lives illustrate the cost of maintaining appearances and honor in a world that often denied them emotional fulfillment, that as the flickering light of lanterns casts long shadows over tatami mats. The silent strength of these women resonates through history. Their experiences of love, loneliness, and betrayal invite reflection on the enduring human need for connection and the profound challenges posed by rigid social structures. In the quiet of the night, their whispered stories remind us of the resilience required to live with both duty and desire, and the courage it takes to endure the unspoken sorrows of marriage. In the quiet, lantern-lit rooms of medieval Japanese homes, the unspoken realities of marriage unfolded in whispered moments and hidden glances. Beneath the veneer of social order and decorum, the lives of wives were shaped by the painful contradictions of fidelity and betrayal. These women, bound by duty and constrained by social norms, carried the weight of infidelity's silent wounds. Marriage, while ideally a sacred union of trust and loyalty, often became a complex negotiation where fidelity was a contested terrain. For women, the expectations were absolute: unwavering loyalty, purity, and submission. Their fidelity was a symbol of family honor, a public testament to virtue that could not be compromised. Yet the same standards rarely applied to men. Husbands, particularly those of status, navigated a world where extramarital relationships were tolerated and even normalized. The presence of concubines, geishas, and courtesans was woven into the fabric of elite society, complicating the marital landscape. This acceptance of male infidelity created emotional fissures within marriages, fissures that wives bore silently. The pain of betrayal was compounded by the societal imperative to maintain appearances, uphold family honor, and preserve the delicate balance of social harmony. Women's responses to infidelity varied widely, shaped by personal strength, social standing, and available support. Some bore their suffering with stoic grace, channeling their pain into spiritual practice, artistic expression, or the care of their children. Others found subtle ways to assert their agency within the confines of their roles, influencing household affairs or navigating family dynamics with quiet diplomacy. The consequences of infidelity for women were severe. A wife suspected of infidelity faced harsh social penalties, ostracism, loss of status, or even divorce. The stigma attached to such accusations was enduring, reflecting deep-seated cultural values around purity and honor. In contrast, men's infidelities were rarely subject to formal censure. Their extramarital relationships were often seen as extensions of their social and political power, tolerated as part of their role within a patriarchal system. This double standard reinforced gender hierarchies, limiting women's autonomy and complicating their emotional lives. The unequal expectations created a landscape where betrayal was both a personal and social wound, experienced differently depending on gender. Within households, the dynamics between wives and concubines, or lovers, were complex. relationships could range from cooperation and pragmatic coexistence to rivalry and jealousy. The presence of multiple women vying for influence and affection added layers of tension to family life. Children born from extramarital relationships further complicated inheritance and succession, creating potential conflicts that wives had to manage carefully. Protecting their own children's status and futures became a critical, often stressful, responsibility. Religious and cultural practices offered women avenues for coping with the emotional strains of betrayal. Buddhism's teachings on impermanence and compassion provided frameworks for understanding suffering, while Shinto rituals offered communal support and spiritual solace. Artistic pursuits became vital outlets for women's emotional expression. Through poetry, music, and calligraphy, they articulated feelings of longing, sorrow, and hope, emotions that societal norms often silenced. These creative acts were both personal catharsis and subtle resistance to their constrained circumstances. The emotional toll of infidelity within marriage was profound, yet women's resilience endured. Their ability to navigate betrayal, maintain family honor, and sustain their own dignity speaks to the strength of the human spirit under duress. As night deepened over ancient Japan, the flickering light of lanterns illuminated the silent strength of these women, their stories echoing through time as testimonies to endurance, love, and the complexities of human relationships. Their experiences invite reflection on the nature of loyalty, the pain of betrayal, and the enduring need for compassion and understanding. In the soft glow of evening, as the lanterns' flickering light painted delicate shadows across sliding shoshi screens, the unspoken realities of infidelity in medieval Japanese marriages were often felt most keenly. Behind the calm facades and ritualistic routines, many wives wrestled with an aching solitude born of betrayal, an experience both deeply personal and profoundly shaped by societal norms. Marriage was presented as a sacred bond, one that demanded unwavering loyalty and mutual respect. Yet, for many women, this ideal remained elusive, overshadowed by the double standards of a patriarchal society that condoned male infidelity, while condemning any perceived transgression by wives. The social expectations placed upon women were exacting. Their fidelity was a public matter, intimately tied to family honor and social standing. A wife's perceived disloyalty could bring lasting disgrace, not just upon herself, but upon her entire household. The fear of such repercussions bound women tightly to the roles expected of them, often at great personal cost. For husbands, the latitude to pursue extramarital relationships was often accepted as a reflection of their status and power. The existence of concubines, lovers, and courtesans was woven into the social fabric, their presence an open secret within noble and samurai circles. These relationships, while unofficial, played significant roles within the household, contributing to its complex emotional and political dynamics. Wives, confronted with this reality, faced emotional turmoil that was seldom acknowledged openly. The pain of betrayal, the sting of neglect, and the loneliness of emotional abandonment were burdens they carried in silence. Their societal roles demanded endurance, patience, and a composed exterior, even as their hearts suffered. The presence of concubines complicated familial relationships and the distribution of affection and influence within the home. Rivalries, jealousy, and competition for status were common, placing additional emotional strain on wives. The household became a microcosm of political intrigue and social negotiation, where emotions ran deep beneath the surface of decorum. Children born of these extramarital unions further intensified these complexities. Questions of legitimacy, inheritance, and affection became delicate matters to be managed with care. Wives often had to protect their own children's interests amidst these fraught dynamics, navigating a labyrinth of social and familial expectations. Despite the acceptance of male infidelity, the emotional consequences for wives were profound. Many found themselves isolated within their own homes, emotionally distanced from their husbands, and socially constrained. The weight of betrayal was compounded by the lack of social support and the stigma surrounding expressions of personal pain. In response, women developed various coping mechanisms. Spiritual practices, including participation in Buddhist and Shinto rituals, provided solace and a framework for understanding suffering. These practices nurtured resilience and offered moments of peace amid emotional hardship. Artistic pursuits became essential outlets for emotional expression. Through poetry, calligraphy, and music, women found ways to voice their feelings, indirectly expressing longing, sorrow, and hope within socially acceptable forms. These creative acts were both personal sanctuary and subtle defiance. Within the household, some wives exerted influence through diplomacy and management of domestic affairs, while public power was often denied to them. They wielded considerable authority within their spheres, shaping family dynamics and safeguarding their children's futures. Open resistance to infidelity was rare and fraught with risk. Social norms and familial pressures discouraged confrontation, and women who challenged their husbands or family structures faced severe consequences, including ostracism or violence. Yet the silent endurance of these women testifies to their strength. Their ability to maintain dignity and fulfill their roles despite emotional wounds is a powerful testament to human resilience. The stories of infidelity and betrayal in medieval Japanese marriages reveal a world of complex emotions and social contradictions. They highlight the profound costs borne by women and the enduring challenges posed by unequal power dynamics. As the night deepens and the world rests under a canopy of stars, the silent strength of these women shines through history. Their lives, marked by love, loss, betrayal, and perseverance, remind us of the timeless human quest for connection and understanding. Their legacy invites us to contemplate the nature of fidelity, the pain of betrayal, and the courage it takes to endure the unspoken sorrows of marriage. In the quiet hush of evening, as the gentle breeze stirs the cherry blossoms, the echoes of their experiences linger, a poignant reminder of lives lived with both sorrow and strength. As the cherry blossoms fall gently upon ancient grounds, we find ourselves reflecting on the deep roots and far-reaching branches of medieval Japanese marriages, their practices, expectations, and the profound legacies they left behind. The marriages of this era, steeped in tradition, duty, and patriarchal control, shaped not only the lives of those who lived them, but also the fabric of Japanese society for centuries to come. The rigid structures, the emphasis on obedience and family honor, and the complex dynamics within households left an indelible mark on cultural norms, social expectations, and gender roles. Women's roles within marriage, defined by and sacrifice, became the foundation upon which societal views of femininity and family were built. The expectations placed on wives to be obedient, bear heirs, and maintain household harmony were echoed in the social fabric beyond the walls of individual homes. These roles reinforced a patriarchal order that permeated legal, economic, and cultural institutions. The control exerted within marriage was mirrored in broader societal structures, limiting women's autonomy and shaping their access to education, property, and public life. The legacy of these marriages is complex. While they ensured social stability and continuity, they also entrenched systems of gender inequality and control. The echoes of medieval marital practices can be seen in later periods of Japanese history, influencing the roles and rights of women well into the modern era. Yet, within this legacy lie stories of resilience, adaptation, and gradual change. Women navigated and sometimes challenged these structures, laying the groundwork for evolving notions of gender and family. As we trace the threads of history forward, we see how the experiences of medieval marriages shaped future generations, in the perpetuation of tradition and in the seeds of transformation. The intricate tapestry of medieval Japanese marriages wove patterns that stretched far beyond the confines of individual households. These unions, characterized by rigid expectations, strict hierarchies, and patriarchal dominance, laid down social norms that would shape Japanese society for generations. The legacy of these marriages is visible not only in the roles women played within the home, but also in the broader structures that governed social, political, and economic life. At the heart of this legacy was the reinforcement of patriarchal authority. The family unit, structured around the dominance of the male head, usually the husband or father, became the model for societal organization. This hierarchy mirrored itself in village governance, samurai clans, and even the imperial court. Women, confined largely to the domestic sphere, were positioned as supportive figures whose primary duties were to serve their husbands and bear heirs. This framework entrenched a vision of womanhood that prized obedience, modesty, and self-sacrifice. These virtues became central to the cultural understanding of femininity, passed down through generations in literature, art, and education. The ideal wife was portrayed as a paragon of virtue, unwavering in loyalty and dedicated wholly to family. Such portrayals did not merely reflect reality, they actively shaped expectations and behaviors. Girls were raised with these ideals imprinted upon them, preparing them for roles that emphasized submission and service. Education for women, when available, focused heavily on domestic skills, and moral instruction aimed at fostering obedience and piety. The effects of these marriage practices extended into legal and economic realms as well. Women's rights to property were limited, often controlled by their husbands or male relatives. Inheritance laws favored male heirs, reinforcing the importance of producing sons and perpetuating male lineage. Women's legal identities were closely tied to their marital status, reducing their autonomy in public life. The legacy of such limitations persisted through centuries, influencing Japan's social fabric long after the medieval period. The societal norms established by these early marriages contributed to the slow evolution of women's roles, creating challenges that reformers and activists would grapple with in later eras. Despite these constraints, the stories of women who lived within and beyond these expectations reveal a more nuanced legacy. While the structures of patriarchy were powerful, they were not immutable. Women found ways to exercise agency within their prescribed roles, influencing family decisions, managing estates, and nurturing cultural traditions. Some women, particularly those of higher status, wielded considerable influence behind the scenes. Through their roles as mothers, educators, and household managers, they shaped the character and futures of their children, often guiding the next generation of leaders. Their impact on family dynamics and community affairs was significant, even if it remained largely unrecognized in official histories. The gradual shift in marriage practices and gender roles over time can be traced back, in part, to these undercurrents of female resilience and adaptation. As Japan moved through the Edo period and into the modern age, the seeds of change planted during medieval times began to sprout, challenging and reshaping long-held traditions. The legacy of medieval marriages is therefore a complex interplay of continuity and change, a testament to the enduring influence of social structures and the persistent efforts of individuals to negotiate, resist, and transform those structures. Moreover, the emotional experiences embedded in these marriages, sacrifices, the struggles, and the moments of love and endurance continue to resonate. They offer profound insights into the human condition and the ways in which culture, power, and personal identity intersect. As we look back upon this legacy, we recognize that the stories of medieval Japanese marriages are not merely historical artifacts but living threads in the ongoing narrative of gender, family, and society. They remind us that the past informs the present, and that understanding these histories is essential to appreciating the complexities of modern relationships and social roles. In the quiet moments of reflection, as cherry blossoms fall softly, and the seasons turn, we honor the lives of those who lived within these marriages, their joys, their sorrows, and their enduring strength. Their legacy is a call to empathy, a challenge to recognize the profound impacts of social structures on individual lives, and an invitation to continue striving toward a world where love, respect, and autonomy are shared by all. The legacy of medieval Japanese marriages, with their strict hierarchies and deeply ingrained patriarchal values, shaped the very foundation of societal norms for centuries. These unions, often arranged to fortify political alliances and secure family honor, established patterns that influenced not only family life but also the roles of women in broader Japanese society. At the core of this legacy was the establishment of a social order where men held authority and women were expected to be loyal, obedient, and subservient. This power dynamic permeated legal codes, social customs, and even cultural expressions, reinforcing gender roles that constrained women's autonomy. The cultural ideal of the obedient wife, who managed the household and raised heirs without question, became a defining feature of Japanese femininity. Girls were socialized from a young age to embody these virtues, learning the importance of humility, duty, and sacrifice. Their education emphasized moral instruction and domestic skills, preparing them for lives centered around family service. These expectations were reinforced in literature and art, which often celebrated the virtues of loyalty and selflessness in women. Tales of devoted wives and mothers who endured hardship for the sake of family became popular motifs, shaping societal perceptions and aspirations. Legally, women's rights were severely limited. The patriarchal structure ensured that property and inheritance passed primarily through male lines, leaving women with little control over land or wealth. Marriage often resulted in women becoming legally subordinate to their husbands, with few rights to challenge decisions or assert independence. The long-term impact of these marriage practices extended into political and economic spheres. Exclusion of women from positions of power and decision-making entrenched gender inequalities that persisted for centuries. Women's participation in public life was constrained, and their voices often marginalized in matters beyond the household. Despite these limitations, women were not merely passive victims of a rigid system. Many exercised considerable influence within their roles, shaping family dynamics and community relationships. The management of households, guidance of children's education, and mediation of family affairs provided avenues for agency and leadership. Some women, particularly from samurai or noble families, wielded power behind the scenes. Their counsel could influence political alliances, estate management, and social networks. These roles, while unofficial, were crucial to the functioning and stability of their families. The resilience and adaptability demonstrated by women in medieval Japan laid important foundations for future social change. Their navigation of complex familial and social expectations helped preserve cultural continuity, while subtly challenging and transforming norms. As Japan progressed into the Edo period and beyond, the legacy of these marriages continued to shape social attitudes. The emphasis on family loyalty and gender roles remained strong, even as economic and political changes prompted gradual shifts in women's opportunities and rights. Educational reforms, legal changes, and the influence of modernization in the Meiji era began to challenge traditional roles. However, the deep-rooted cultural narratives established during medieval times continued to influence perceptions of gender and marriage. The long-term effects of these rigid structures are evident in the continued emphasis on family cohesion, filial piety, and defined gender roles in modern Japanese society. While progress has been made, echoes of medieval expectations persist, influencing social norms and individual experiences. Reflecting on this legacy invites us to consider the profound ways in which historical practices shape contemporary realities. The sacrifices and constraints experienced by medieval women remind us of the importance of autonomy, equality, and respect in relationships and society. Understanding the complex history of marriage in Japan offers insights into ongoing struggles and achievements related to gender roles, family dynamics, and social expectations. It highlights the necessity of honoring past experiences while striving for a more inclusive and equitable future. In contemplating the enduring impact of medieval marriages, we also acknowledge the strength and resilience of the women who lived within them. Their stories, often overshadowed in history, continue to inspire and inform. Their legacy is not only one of limitation and control, but also of perseverance and quiet empowerment. These women shaped their families and communities in ways that resonate through time, influencing the cultural fabric of Japan. As cherry blossoms bloom and fade with the seasons, so too does society evolve, carrying with it the memories and lessons of those who came before. The legacy of medieval marriages serves as both a reminder and a guidepost, urging reflection on how far we have come and the journey still ahead. In the gentle embrace of history, we find both caution and hope, a testament to the enduring human spirit and the possibility of transformation. The echoes of medieval Japanese marriages ripple through history, shaping not only the immediate families involved, but also the societal structures that followed. The deeply entrenched patterns of control, hierarchy, and gender roles established during this time laid the groundwork for centuries of cultural norms that influenced every aspect of Japanese life. One of the most profound legacies of these marriages was the solidification of the patriarchal family system, known as the IIG-JAS system. This system emphasized the family lineage, inheritance, and social order, placing the male head of the household at its center. Women's roles within this framework were primarily to support the continuation of the family line through obedience, childbearing, and household management. The IE system dictated that the family unit was paramount, and individual desires were secondary. This collective approach to family life reinforced social stability, but also perpetuated the subordination of women. Their identity and worth were largely defined by their relationship to the male head first, their fathers, then their husbands, and later their sons. These structures had lasting implications for women's rights and social status. Property rights were limited, and legal authority was concentrated in male hands. Women were often excluded from political power, educational opportunities, and economic independence. Their lives were largely confined to domestic spaces, where their influence was indirect and often unrecognized. The cultural narratives that emerged from this legacy celebrated virtues such as loyalty, chastity, and self-sacrifice for women. These ideals were taught through family upbringing, literature, religious teachings, and social expectations. Girls were educated in the arts of household management, moral conduct, and obedience, preparing them to fulfill the roles prescribed by the IE system. This legacy of prescribed roles and limited autonomy influenced family dynamics profoundly. The expectations placed on wives and mothers shaped intergenerational relationships, with mothers imparting the values of obedience and duty to their daughters. This cycle reinforced the continuity of patriarchal norms and the centrality of family honor. However, within this framework, women found ways to exert agency and influence, managing the household, educating children, and maintaining social networks were critical roles that required skill, intelligence, and diplomacy. Women's emotional labor, often invisible, was essential to the cohesion and success of families. Some women, particularly in elite families, navigated these constraints to become influential figures by acting as mediators, advisors, and custodians of family reputation. They shaped decisions and relationships within their communities. Their contributions, though seldom publicly acknowledged, were vital. The endurance of these legacy patterns is evident in the social structures of later historical periods. The Edo period saw the formalization of the IE system, which further codified gender roles and family hierarchies. Women's roles remained focused on domestic responsibilities, with limited access to education and legal rights. As Japan entered the Meiji Restoration and the subsequent modernization era, these traditional roles faced new challenges. Legal reforms, introduced in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, began to address women's rights, including property ownership and education. Yet, cultural expectations rooted in medieval marriage traditions persisted, influencing social attitudes and behaviors. The tension between traditional expectations and modern reforms shaped the evolving roles of women in Japanese society. While legal changes expanded opportunities, the deep-seated cultural values around family, loyalty, and gender roles continued to inform personal and social identities. Understanding the legacy of medieval marriages provides critical insight into these ongoing dynamics. It reveals how historical practices and cultural narratives influence contemporary gender relations and family structures. The emotional and social legacies of these marriages also underscore the importance of recognizing and valuing women's experiences and contributions throughout history. Their resilience, adaptability, and strength have been foundational to the endurance of families and communities. Reflecting on this legacy invites us to consider the balance between tradition and change, collective responsibility and individual rights, and the ways in which history informs present-day struggles for gender equality. The stories of medieval marriages and their impact serve as a reminder that societal structures are both products of history and arenas of ongoing negotiation and transformation. In honoring the legacy of these marriages, we recognize the complexities of human relationships and the enduring quest for dignity. respect, and autonomy within family and society. As the seasons turn and new generations rise, the echoes of these ancient unions remind us of the profound interplay between past and present, a legacy that continues to shape lives and aspirations. The profound influence of medieval Japanese marriages extends far beyond the private lives of those bound by such unions. These marriages laid down cultural expectations and social structures that shaped Japanese society's very foundations for centuries to come. To understand the enduring impact, one must first appreciate how these matrimonial practices wove themselves into the cultural fabric, influencing everything from family hierarchy to gender relations and even legal and economic systems. Central to this legacy is the institutionalization of the patriarchal family system. This family unit was not merely a household but a social and economic entity, headed by the eldest male, usually the father or husband, who wielded legal and moral authority over all members. Women's roles were narrowly defined: wives, mothers, and daughters, whose primary functions were to maintain the household, bear heirs, and uphold family honor. The IE system enforced strict hierarchical relationships within families. Women were subordinated to male authority figures and expected to exhibit obedience and loyalty above all else. Their worth was often measured by their ability to fulfill duties, especially motherhood, and their compliance with social norms. Such structures were reinforced not only by custom but codified in laws and regulations, embedding patriarchy deeply into societal institutions. These marriage customs and familial hierarchies entrenched gender roles that limited women's autonomy and shaped their societal participation. Property rights, inheritance laws, and legal status overwhelmingly favored men. Women's access to education and public life was restricted, confining much of their influence to the domestic sphere. This social order had long-lasting effects, affecting women's opportunities, freedoms, and social status for generations. The image of the obedient wife and devoted mother became idealized virtues, celebrated in literature, art, and moral teachings, creating a cultural narrative that perpetuated these roles. Children were raised within this framework, internalizing the expectations of their gender roles from an early age. Daughters were taught the virtues of submission and duty, preparing them for their future as wives within the same system. Sons were groomed to uphold family honor and continue patriarchal leadership. The consequences of this legacy were far-reaching. Women's social mobility was limited, and their legal rights curtailed. Marriage, as a social institution, became both a vehicle for maintaining family power and a mechanism for reinforcing gender inequality. However, history also reveals women's resilience and agency within these constraints. Many women found ways to assert influence within their families and communities, managing households, guiding children's education, and subtly shaping family decisions. Some wielded considerable behind-the-scenes power, especially as matriarchs or widows. These roles were complex and nuanced. While public authority was reserved for men, women's private authority within the household was often substantial. Their management of domestic affairs, social relationships, and even economic resources was critical to family survival and success. The legacy of medieval marriages also influenced the evolution of gender relations in Japan. The social norms and expectations formed during this era persisted through subsequent periods, including the Edo era and into modern times. Even as Japan underwent modernization and legal reforms, cultural attitudes rooted in these traditions continued to affect women's lives. During the Meiji Restoration and the 20th century, significant legal reforms improved women's rights in education, property ownership, and participation in public life. However, traditional values around family, duty, and gender roles remained influential, shaping societal expectations and personal identities. Contemporary Japan continues to grapple with the balance between tradition and modernity, particularly regarding gender equality and family roles. The echoes of medieval marital practices remind us that cultural legacies are powerful forces that shape attitudes and behaviors across generations. Understanding this legacy is vital to appreciating the complexities of gender dynamics in Japan. Today, it highlights the importance of historical context in discussions about women's rights. social change, and family structures. Moreover, the stories of medieval women, their struggles, endurance, and subtle influence offer valuable insights into the ongoing quest for gender equity. They remind us that social systems, no matter how entrenched, can evolve through the resilience and agency of individuals. In reflecting on the legacy of medieval Japanese marriages, we honor not only the structures that shaped society, but the human stories woven within them, the sacrifices, the strength, and the quiet courage of women who lived within these constraints. Their experiences invite us to consider the ways history informs present realities and to envision futures where autonomy, respect, and equality are accessible to all. As the cherry blossoms bloom anew each spring, so too does society hold the potential for renewal, carrying forward lessons of the past toward a more just and compassionate future. As the centuries passed, the imprint of medieval marriage practices continued to shape Japanese society in profound and often subtle ways. These enduring traditions sculpted not only familial roles, but also influenced societal expectations, gender dynamics, and even political and economic structures. The IE system, which solidified during medieval times, remained the cornerstone of Japanese family life well into the modern era. Its emphasis on patriarchal authority and familial continuity entrenched a model where women's identities and freedoms were closely tied to their roles within the household. The expectation that women would subordinate their desires to family duty became deeply embedded in cultural values. This legacy manifested in numerous aspects of society. In the Edo period, 1603 to 1868, for example, the IE system was legally codified and socially reinforced. Women were expected to maintain household harmony and bear heirs to sustain family lines. Education for girls was largely focused on domestic skills and moral teachings aligned with obedience and loyalty, while men occupied public spheres of power, politics, and commerce. Women's influence remained primarily within the home, though often significant behind the scenes. They managed households, preserved family wealth, and guided the upbringing of children, roles essential for maintaining social stability. These gendered divisions, rooted in medieval marriage practices, shaped social interactions and power relations. They limited women's participation in public decision-making and reinforced their dependence on male relatives. Legal reforms in the Meiji era, 1868 to 1912, began to challenge these structures, granting women greater rights to education, property, and legal recognition. Yet, even as laws evolved, cultural expectations based on medieval ideals persisted, influencing women's social status and personal agency. The legacy of these marriages is thus a story of both continuity and change. While formal structures adapted, cultural narratives around femininity, duty, and family honor continued to influence behavior and social norms. These deeply ingrained values also affected how women viewed themselves and their roles. Many internalized the ideals of loyalty, modesty, and sacrifice, shaping their identities within the constraints imposed by history. At the same time, women's resilience and adaptability allowed for gradual transformations. Through education, social engagement, and activism, women began to redefine their roles and assert greater autonomy. The echoes of medieval marriage practices also influenced contemporary family dynamics. The expectations of filial piety, respect for elders, and family cohesion remained strong in Japanese society, reflecting the enduring impact of historical family models. However, these traditions have been both challenged and reinterpreted in light of modern values, emphasizing individual rights, gender equality, and personal fulfillment. The tension between tradition and modernity continues to shape Japanese social discourse. Reflecting on the legacy of medieval marriages offers valuable lessons about the intersections of history, culture, and gender. It highlights how past practices shape present realities and the importance of understanding these influences to promote social progress. The experiences of women in medieval marriage is marked by sacrifice, resilience, and quiet strength remain relevant. They remind us that social change is often gradual and rooted in the lived realities of individuals. Navigating complex cultural landscapes, their stories encourage empathy and recognition of the challenges faced by women throughout history. inspiring efforts to create societies where autonomy, dignity, and equality are attainable. As we look to the future, the legacy of medieval marriages serves as both a caution and a call to action, a reminder of the power of tradition and the human capacity for transformation. In honoring this legacy, we pay tribute to the women who lived within it and to the ongoing journey toward a more just and inclusive world. As the gentle light of dawn breaks over the hills of Japan, casting a soft glow on ancient temples and modern cities alike, we pause to reflect on the profound journey of marriage, a journey marked by struggle, endurance, and transformation. Medieval Japanese marriages, as we have seen, were often fraught with injustice and inequality, particularly for women. Bound by rigid social structures and patriarchal norms, many women faced lives constrained by obligation, silence, and sacrifice. Their experiences remind us of the costs imposed by systems that prioritized family honor and social order over individual autonomy and happiness. Yet, history is not static. The passage of time brings change slow, often contested, but undeniable. The injustices of the past have sown seeds of awareness and reform, inspiring movements toward greater equality and justice. In modern Japan, marriage has evolved significantly from the arranged unions of medieval times. Today, ideals of love, partnership, and mutual respect increasingly shape relationships. Women enjoy greater legal rights, educational opportunities, and social freedoms than ever before, reshaping the dynamics of marriage and family. This evolution reflects broader shifts in societal values toward individual rights, gender equality, and personal fulfillment. The roles of wives and husbands are no longer strictly prescribed by tradition, but are negotiated and redefined within each partnership. While challenges remain, the journey from medieval marriages to contemporary relationships highlights the resilience of the human spirit and the power of social change. It invites us to honor the struggles of those who came before and to commit to building a future grounded in justice and equality. The journey from the rigid confines of medieval Japanese marriages to the evolving institution of modern times is one marked by profound transformation. It is a path illuminated by the courage of countless women and men who challenged the limitations of their eras, advocating for justice, dignity, and mutual respect within the sacred bond of marriage. In the centuries past, women were often confined to lives of obedience and sacrifice, their voices muted beneath the weight of societal expectations. Their marriages, arranged for political alliances and family honor, left little room for personal choice or emotional fulfillment. Yet, even in such constrained circumstances, women exhibited remarkable resilience, navigating their roles with strength and quiet courage. Modern perspectives on marriage reflect a radical shift from these historical norms. The emphasis on love, partnership, and equality marks a profound departure from the transactional and hierarchical relationships of medieval times. In today's Japan, marriage is increasingly viewed as a union of equals, grounded in shared values and mutual support. Legal reforms over the past century have been instrumental in reshaping marital dynamics. Women's rights to education, employment, property, and legal recognition have expanded, empowering them to participate fully in family and society. These changes have challenged traditional gender roles and opened new possibilities for personal fulfillment. The rise of individualism and changing social attitudes have also influenced expectations around marriage. Young people today often seek partners based on affection and compatibility rather than familial obligation. The concept of marriage as a lifelong partnership based on love and respect has gained prominence. Despite these advances, challenges persist. Gender inequality, social pressures, and cultural traditions continue to influence marital relationships and family life. Balancing modern ideals with deeply rooted cultural values remains a complex task for many couples. The legacy of medieval marriages serves as both a cautionary tale and a source of inspiration. It reminds us of the harms caused by rigid social structures that deny autonomy and perpetuate inequality. At the same time, it highlights the capacity for change and the enduring human desire for connection and justice. Reflecting on this legacy invites a deeper appreciation of the progress made and the work still to be done. It calls upon society to continue striving toward relationships and institutions that honor the dignity and equality of all individuals. The evolution of marriage in Japan illustrates the transformative power of cultural reflection, legal reform, and personal courage. It is a testament to the human capacity to redefine norms and to build bonds rooted in love and respect. As the sun rises over Japan's landscapes, ancient temples, bustling cities, and tranquil countryside, it illuminates a society shaped by history yet reaching toward a future of greater equality. In this light, we honor the women of medieval times whose lives, though constrained, laid foundations of endurance and hope. We celebrate the strides made by generations since, and we embrace the ongoing journey toward justice and partnership. May their stories guide us toward relationships built on empathy, mutual respect, and true equality, a legacy worthy of their sacrifices and dreams. As the gentle morning light cascades over the landscapes of Japan, ancient forests, serene rivers, and vibrant cities, we find ourselves reflecting on the profound transformation that marriage has undergone from the medieval era to the present day. The journey from rigid duty-bound unions to partnerships founded on mutual love and respect is a testament to humanity's enduring capacity for growth and change. Medieval Japanese marriages were deeply intertwined with the social fabric, political alliances, and cultural expectations of their time. Women, often entering these unions without choice or consent, bore immense burdens, expected to be obedient daughters, devoted wives, and nurturing mothers, all while navigating a world that afforded them little autonomy or recognition. Their lives were framed by sacrifice, resilience, and silent endurance. These historical realities expose the injustices embedded in past marital practices, where women's voices were often silenced, their desires suppressed, and their freedoms curtailed. They lived lives defined not by their own aspirations but by the imperatives of family honor and social order. The emotional loneliness, betrayal, isolation echoed through generations. Yet, history is not merely a record of injustice, but also a narrative of transformation. The evolving views on marriage, gender roles, and personal autonomy reflect the dynamic nature of culture and society. Modern Japan presents a dramatically different picture, one where marriage is increasingly shaped by values of equality, partnership, and mutual respect. Legal reforms over the last century have expanded women's rights dramatically. Access to education, property ownership, employment, and political participation has transformed women's social roles. These changes have empowered women to assert their identities beyond domestic confines and have begun reshaping marital dynamics. The shift toward love-based marriage, where personal choice and emotional connection are paramount, is one of the most significant cultural transformations. Couples today often seek relationships founded on shared values, companionship, and affection, rather than arranged alliances or social obligation. However, this journey is ongoing and complex. Traditional expectations still influence many aspects of family life and gender roles in Japan. Balancing modern ideals with cultural heritage presents challenges for individuals and society alike. The legacy of medieval marriages serves as both a historical lesson and a source of inspiration. It reminds us of the harm caused by rigid patriarchal systems and the profound human need for dignity, autonomy, and connection. It also highlights the strength and resilience of those who lived within such constraints, whose quiet courage paved the way for change. Today, as we witness the evolving institution of marriage in Japan and around the world, we are called to honor this legacy by fostering relationships based on equality, respect, and empathy. The path toward justice is ongoing, requiring awareness, dialogue, and commitment to shared humanity. In reflecting on the past, we gain insight into the present and hope for a future where the bonds of marriage enrich lives through love, partnership, and mutual support. The stories of medieval women, their struggles and endurance, invite us to create societies that value every voice and uphold the dignity of all. As the cherry blossoms bloom and fall, each year symbols of impermanence and renewal, we are reminded that cultural change, like the seasons, unfolds gradually, but inevitably. The evolution of marriage is a living testament to this truth. May the reflections on justice and change inspire us to nurture relationships that celebrate equality and love. honoring the past while embracing the possibilities of the future. As the world around us changes, so too do our understandings of justice, equality, and love. Reflecting on the history of medieval Japanese marriages offers profound insights into how deeply embedded cultural practices influence generations, shaping lives in ways both visible and hidden. These marriages were not just private arrangements. They were social institutions that codified and reinforced patriarchal norms and gender hierarchies, leaving lasting imprints on society. In the quiet lives of medieval women, often marked by duty, silence, and sacrifice, we glimpse the costs of inequality. Their experiences remind us that behind every social structure are real human lives, with hopes, pains, and dreams. The emotional isolation, the lack of autonomy, and the burdens of expectation were daily realities for many. These were not mere historical abstractions, but lived experiences that shaped identities and destinies. Yet the human spirit's capacity for endurance and adaptation is equally evident. Women found strength in community, spirituality, and creativity. They navigated complex social terrains with resilience and subtlety, influencing family dynamics and preserving cultural continuity. Their stories, often unrecorded in grand histories, form the backbone of societal endurance and change. Modern Japan's evolving views on marriage reflect a significant departure from these historical norms. The shift toward relationships based on mutual respect, emotional connection, and personal choice marks a profound cultural transformation. This shift has been driven by legal reforms, increased education, and changing social attitudes that recognize women's rights and contributions beyond traditional roles. Despite progress, the legacy of medieval marriages remains influential. Cultural expectations around gender and family continue to shape behavior and societal norms. Women often balance traditional roles with modern aspirations, navigating tensions between conformity and change. The ongoing dialogue about gender equality, work-life balance, and family structures reflects these enduring influences. Understanding this legacy is crucial for fostering empathy and promoting justice. It reminds us that equality is not merely a legal status but a lived reality shaped by culture, history, and individual agency. Achieving true partnership requires addressing both the visible and invisible barriers inherited from the past. The reflections on justice and change also inspire us to honor those who came before the women and men who lived within and sometimes challenged the constraints of their time. Their resilience and courage are foundations upon which contemporary movements for equality build. As society continues to evolve, it is essential to recognize the value of diverse experiences and voices. Embracing change while respecting cultural heritage enables the creation of relationships and communities grounded in respect, love, and shared humanity. In contemplating the journey from medieval marriages to modern partnerships, we find hope in the possibility of transformation. The path toward justice and equality is ongoing, requiring awareness, compassion, and commitment. The stories of past generations serve as guides, reminding us that social norms are neither fixed nor immutable. They can be reimagined and reshaped to create more inclusive and equitable futures. As cherry blossoms bloom briefly each spring, symbolizing both beauty and impermanence, so too does the institution of marriage continue to grow and change. This ongoing evolution invites us to participate actively in crafting relationships and societies that honor dignity, autonomy, and love. May the reflections shared here illuminate the importance of justice and change in our own lives, and inspire us to build a world where all individuals can thrive in partnerships founded on equality and mutual respect. As we gaze upon the unfolding tapestry of history, the legacy of medieval Japanese marriages reveals itself as a complex blend of hardship, endurance, and gradual transformation. These marriages, while grounded in rigid social hierarchies and patriarchal control, are a testament to the human capacity for survival amidst constraint and the persistent hope for change. For countless women of that era, marriage was a passage into a world where personal freedom was limited and duty to family and social order reigned supreme. Their lives, often defined by obedience and sacrifice, were marked by moments of quiet strength that, though hidden from the annals of history, shaped the fabric of society. Their stories remind us of the profound emotional and social costs embedded in traditions that prioritized collective stability over individual autonomy. Yet even in the face of these constraints, the seeds of transformation were sown. The resilience and subtle agency displayed by these women laid the groundwork for evolving social norms. Through education, spiritual practice, and the nurturing of family and community, they forged pathways that would slowly challenge and reshape gender roles in the centuries to come. The journey from medieval to modern Japanese marriage is one of both continuity and change. The patriarchal, i.e. system established during medieval times, persisted into later periods, codifying roles and expectations that defined family and gender relations. However, as Japan entered the modern era, legal reforms, economic shifts, and cultural influences began to redefine these relationships. Women gained greater access to education and legal rights, allowing them to participate more fully in social and economic life. The rise of individualism and the influence of global ideas about equality transformed perceptions of marriage from arranged alliances to partnerships based on mutual affection and respect. Despite these advances, the echoes of medieval expectations remain. Traditional values continue to influence family dynamics, gender roles, and societal attitudes. Balancing respect for cultural heritage with the pursuit of gender equality remains an ongoing challenge. Reflecting on this legacy offers valuable lessons. It underscores the importance of recognizing historical injustices and their lasting impact, while celebrating the resilience and agency of those who lived within constrained circumstances. Understanding this history is essential for fostering empathy and guiding contemporary efforts towards social justice. The evolution of marriage in Japan exemplifies the dynamic interplay between tradition and modernity. It highlights how social institutions adapt in response to changing cultural, economic, and political landscapes, shaped by the actions of individuals and communities. This reflection also calls attention to the universal human desires that transcend time: the need for love, respect, autonomy, and connection. While the forms and expressions of marriage have evolved, these core aspirations remain constant, reminding us of our shared humanity. As we conclude this exploration, we honor the women and men whose lives and choices have shaped the institution of marriage in Japan. Their stories, woven through centuries of change, inspire us to continue striving for relationships and societies grounded in equality and compassion. In the quiet moments of reflection, as cherry blossoms fall softly too, the earth and the world breathes beneath a sky of stars. We are reminded that the journey toward justice and change is ongoing, a shared endeavor that calls upon us all. May these reflections guide us toward a future where every individual's dignity is upheld, where love and partnership are celebrated in their fullest expressions, and where the lessons of history illuminate the path forward. Thus, as the sun rises anew, casting light upon both ancient temples and modern homes, we embrace the enduring legacy of love, resilience, and transformation, legacy that continues to shape the hearts and lives of people across Japan and the world.